shot.
And hello, everybody, and welcome in Mr. Rich with Mr. Belgic. Today, I have the pleasure to have a great panel, one of the best, with Mr. Ned Dehan from BBOR, Zach Wilcox, Mr. Druzer, and Mr. Ross Geraci. How are you guys?
Good.
Great.
Fantastic.
Doing just
So-
fine. Thank you, Jerome.
So today we are going to talk about different subjects, but we have asked on Discord what was the first subject that people want to hear about, and it was Gaviota Beach. So we will talk about Gaviota Beach and Ray Davis in contrast with Paul Stein and the attack of the Lake Berryessa and other stuff. We know it's a panel, so we can talk about everything we want. So we will start with Mr. Ross Geraci. By the way, Ross, congratulations for your debut on Spotify.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate
Sounds
it. Yeah.
fantastic, man.
Thank you, gents. Go check me out on Zodiac Speaking everywhere: Podbean, Spotify, Google, whatever that one's. Apple Podcasts or whatever that one's called. Like we were saying, I think maybe Ned was the show before me, Lake Herman Road, and Druzer was a couple shows before that. So check out those as well. And I'll get my notes up in the back here at some point. But let's get into it, boys. Like I said, I would go ahead and avoid Riverside for the most part. I don't think any of us have a deep interest to spin our wheels continually. And until someday someone makes an announcement there, I say we just forget it altogether and go to something new. Ray Davis, Gaviota Beach, and who knows, maybe we get to some other stuff down the line.
Yep. So we want to start with what subject?
Let's do Ray Davis, 1962.
Okay, there we go.
It's going to be a challenge for Ross right now not to move to Gaviota Beach.
Druzer brought that up when we were off air. That wasn't me. That was
Keep him on track. Right.
Hey, this is what we're gonna do. So in 1963, Dominguez Edwards. No, I'm just joking. Ray Davis, so he's this cab driver. I would argue that this is like a strong parallel to like the Paul Stein killing. October 8th, 1969. We could obviously present it through a canonical lens so the audience can understand it. Maybe a couple differences with Ray Davis. The money and the wallet is like left there. It's not taken like it is with Stein for what is an obvious trophy. I don't really think that's a Zodiac doing a robbery because he is going to use it to brag and write all these letters later on. The strong thing we have with Davis that we don't have with the Swindles, you might possibly have it with Riverside, but who cares for this argument? You don't really have it with Santa Barbara that we know of. There's these phone calls. You get a threatening phone call before. I'm going to pull something at Riverside you people have never seen. And you get a threatening phone call afterwards, which is next time I'm going to get me a bus driver. The whole bus thing makes you think of, picking off little kitties as they come bouncing out, or the bus bomb diagram letter. And also Ray Davis is dumped between the mayor, the former mayor, and the current mayor's house. So I always thought that is some political, I don't know.
He's trying to make a statement of some kind. There's no debating that. I don't think.
He could have did it anywhere. He could have did it on the beach.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Oceanside.
And it shows that he has knowledge of the space and that he
100%.
the actual the big players in town.
Unless you think random, unless you think that's a random spot, Druzer, and it just happens.
Well, because he never mentions it. He doesn't exhibit any ideological stuff at all. You know, he had everyone's attention and then didn't come to anything.
Didn't take the podium.
Don't you feel like if the person wants attention, which we know they do because they wrote letters, then why would they would want to dump it in a site of
that's the best,
high notoriety.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If there was a reason.
How do we know the Davis murderer wrote letters yet? Because this is still 1962 and letters have not appeared. As Ross said, we have the phone call with Ray Davis where somebody calls in and says, I'm going to pull something real nasty in Oceanside and you'll never figure it out. Then, now Ross, you can correct me if I'm misstating any of this. Then there's the murder. Then there's the dumping of the body. And then there's another phone call that happens. But the Davis murderer does not write a letter, correct? Stating, like, this is my confession. And, like, I'm always on the skeptical side with these things, kind of like what Druzer's talking about. Yeah, it seems like it, right? Okay, he dumped it by the mayor's house. He's trying to send a message to the mayor and the community. Or sometimes people do things that are just a little bit crazy and it just happens that way. So with Druzer, I really do appreciate the skepticism, but there's no letter that comes after Davis, right?
Not to our knowledge.
I think
we would have that knowledge.
Right, 100%. I think Zach is supposing that if the killer of Ray Davis is indeed the Zodiac, he just hasn't quite gotten to the point of writing letters yet.
Right. Okay. So just to be clear, a letter was never written in the Ray Davis case.
Not that we know.
Knowledge, we don't.
It was only phone calls, right?
Yeah, but it is someone using
threatening in some way.
Well, someone using a cab driver who's an easy target, dumping them in an affluent part of town and using that awful exercise in order to gain whatever kind of attention. So there are some parallels as common as cab driver murders are.
We're back.
There are an enormous amount of parallels. I think they're very similar crimes. And when I did my kind of episode where I'm rating the likelihood of this actually being the same Zodiac Killer of the late 1960s, I said 7 out of 10, about a 70% chance. That's not 100. As you see, there's still a little bit of room where I am not convinced, but 70% chance. Think about all the similarities that you guys have said, especially in looking at Paul Stine as a case example and Ray Davis as a case example. Just about how he targeted a taxi driver, and it was in somewhat of an impractical way. It appears that it was specifically done for murder. It doesn't look like a botched robbery. This person was targeted because they wanted to set up a murder, put it in motion. If they did dump the body by the mayor's house to send a message, absolutely that sounds like the Zodiac, because the Zodiac is murdering a taxi driver for no practical reason, maybe just about positioning. That whole stuff about points on a map. A big problem that I do have, though, is, just to contradict myself, because I do that, is that the Zodiac didn't drag anybody's body out and leave bodies behind. The Zodiac really leaves the bodies where they are, with the exception of handling Paul Stine's body in the taxi. And that's what's bothered me about the Ray Davis crime, as well as Domingos Edwards, that the bodies are moved for specific reasons. And Ross will probably disagree with me about a lot about this. What do you say, Ross?
I don't think so. I think I agree with more of it. I see him touching Paul and him touching Ray as a similar action, Gaviota Beach aside. Really, from my understanding, what Susanna said is, I think you might have been on those shows, Druzer, is she said he grabbed Ray's either belt or belt loops and kind of just dumped it. You know what I mean? So it's not, I would argue that he touched Paul more than he touched Ray. I mean, again, we have absolutely no details on this, right, Druzer? But just from my perspective, if he simply, but the problem is I guess this is where we would come into alignment, Ned, is he dumps him out of the driver's seat and then drives the taxi like north for like a totally unknown. That's totally
really
random.
weird.
I can't really explain that, but maybe just to get the taxi to like a lesser seen spot. But
the killer said before the crime that he was going to pull off something baffling, I think was the word. Yeah,
and he certainly did.
So it seems like it was he was intending to make it confusing. Maybe 100%. So the lack of motive is the motive. But is So is what's in my memory right now a transcribed version of the phone call? Is that why I think why I thought it was a letter?
Possibly, yeah.
Right.
Although I don't know how, because it was pretty brief, Druzer, so I don't know how much transcription there is for the Davis stuff. So the other thing, that gets brought up is like the train running past Gaviota Beach. Like Morf and I discussed this briefly. There's a train right here. Well, close enough at Ray Davis, right? It's one line of houses, the alleyway, a line of houses. On that other far side is the ocean front. It's the actual beach. And then basically a grassy kind of divider. And then the train is right there. So if the killer waits for those gunshots for the train cover, then at that time at night, kind of quiet. Also, you were alluding to this, you guys, with the Stein stuff. Presidio Heights, an affluent neighborhood. This being an affluent neighborhood of Oceanside. So it might just be the two, I guess, ritzy areas could be the target. Whatever you guys may think on that.
I feel like it's difficult for me to believe or for me to visualize a scene where you would be able to control a crime to the point where you'd be able to fire gunshots while a train was going by.
Depending on how frequent it is, because you could just have them at gunpoint and simply just being, and if it happens to come by,
absolutely. It just feels like a lot to gamble on. There's a lot of variables and a lot of blank space in between that. So as a person, if we're gonna put him in the lane of Zodiac, or even say that this person is relatively good at getting away with murder, seems like a crazy risk to take. But maybe he was just lucky. I mean, there's no way to prove that.
What were you gonna say, Druzer?
Well, I guess at the outset, we know nothing about Zodiac because there's not enough crimes. Even if you include these, I mean, with these outlier crimes, if we were certain of one of them, that would give us some more information on 100%. All of them.
100%.
Yeah. I always wonder how much this information was fluid throughout California at that time, and how much true crime enthusiasts actually had access to true and real information. Because if you were a person like Zodiac and you were in the shadows planning this killing spree or something, some version of it in the background, and you were able to read true crime and take a look at the data of to what types of crimes are going unsolved, then maybe that's the connection as opposed to the person actually committing all of these crimes. It's like, because he's clearly intending to try and get away with crimes and commit this murder spree. None of these are happening in the heat of the moment or passion by any means. So, I mean, it's hard for me to say because, maybe there's this newspaper archive back then. It was easy for somebody to get a hold of that and actually compile the data on what was the easiest crimes to get away with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it would be known that the easiest crimes to get away with are ones committed by strangers.
For sure, but even more specifically, are these there's lots of cab drivers being murdered all around Southern California at the time. How known is that? And I'm trying to play ignorant here because I just don't know. How known is the Gaviota Beach murders?
To answer your question, though, these murders were highly publicized in the papers. And we don't know this for 100%, but I think the Zodiac was an avid reader of newspapers. Agreed. And not only were the murders publicized in the papers, the links among them were also publicized. Now, this is saying the swindle murders is quite similar to the Domingos Edwards murders. People thought that there were connections.
So people were connecting those back then before Zodiac was ever in the atmosphere.
No.
They were. Yes.
Well,
no.
Well, there's Well, it's after the fact, as Druzer was saying, I think, right? Because first the canonicals have to happen,
right?
And then the links need to be drawn by the journalists.
So there's no evidence
that there was a possible connection between the swindles and Gaviota.
Oh,
that wasn't during the Zodiac crimes, though. If we're trying,
of course not, because Zodiac hadn't debuted yet. What I was telling Zach was that were these crimes widely publicized, and was this information easily available? Yes, these were frequently talked about in the Southern California newspapers, and the links among them were also talked about. That was just one example. I've read that article off before on Black Box Online Radio about how people thought that there could be a link between the swindle murders and
Yep.
Gaviota, and Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, talks about this all the time when he's just like, hey, his observations aren't baseless because he goes back to those same types of thinking. Now, if you want to say, is this something that is extremely widely discussed, like the links among all these Southern California murders? I don't know how widely discussed. It's definitely been mentioned in the papers, but I think that this information would be easily available. And also, Zach's saying that there are cab murderers all over Southern California. Perhaps, but I really don't think it's as frequent as we actually think, because I think that murder was probably a little bit less common than what people are thinking about. Maybe you're thinking about urban inner cities where there's just a crime happening every single day. It seems like they're a little bit more infrequent than that.
I'd say there's a lot of crimes on cab drivers, but not necessarily murders, because there's really nothing in it to for a criminal to kill.
So the question is, through deductive reasoning, could somebody who was planning to commit a murder spree land on killing is it logical for them to land on killing a cab driver who's trying to get as the most likely to get away with?
Well, not just that.
Yes.
So I think to Druzer's point that the cab driver robberies are more frequent, right? And because of that, robbery with a knife, robbery with a gun, it's almost like a type of thing for Zodiac to lean into. Like, basically, what's the point of the line of when you're robbing a cab driver, when you lose control and you end up shooting them or something like that? So I think that kind of fits into to what Zach was going on. The other thing to Zach's point is, I think he's saying how far north would these non-canonical articles make it, because it only gets up to Santa Barbara, maybe Santa Cruz, and it doesn't quite make it up to San Jose, Santa Clara, and the rest of the Bay Area.
It'd just be interesting to see how the information scales as it goes north, right? And that's all.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see Vallejo, Napa, or San Francisco coverage of any of these crimes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, was there not a Gaviota Beach or Ray Davis, I could be getting the two confused, was there not some sort of detective comic book published about those crimes at some point in time as well? They had done some true crime
maybe Ray Davis. I don't know. Morf asked me this on the episode. I don't know that Gaviota ever showed up in the true
not to my knowledge. The Riverside crime.
I know Riverside did. Riverside did.
Well documented. Yes. Yeah. That's hey. If we could crowdsource that, anybody in the audience, if you have a massive article database, please let us know.
Yeah, it'd just be interesting because, like, basically, I don't see a lot of evidence that that outweighs Zodiac being inspired by these crimes rather than committing these crimes.
Well, that's the thing, is because we don't see any coverage of these crimes in the area that Zodiac was in, at least in '68. It's hard to go too far with he was inspired by it. None of them came up in conversation with regards to Zodiac during his crime spree, other than the Riverside one, which, as Zodiac says, is the easy one because there's
but that wasn't Zodiac's choice to bring that in either. It was, I guess he did bring it in to some extent, but I mean, Paul Avery and whoever did stumble upon that information. It wasn't Z that just handed that up.
It came up. Riverside approached Napa before the Paul Stein crime. After the Lake Berryessa crime, they saw a connection, and so everyone was in the know about it. A year later, Avery gets a tip and writes his article. Six months after that, Zodiac acknowledges it.
Yeah, which doesn't seem like Zodiac even rushed to acknowledge it. On the front of waiting for the train, background noise, white noise coverage for the gunshots, I actually think that does play into Zodiac's MO, because if you believe that there's a gun range behind Lake Herman Road, he attacks on July 4th, July 5th for those fireworks. That one actually does track up to an extent. How nobody hears those shots at Paul Stein's Presidio Heights, I've never quite figured that out. I don't know that a closed car is quite that insulated, but
so was it? It was always a shooting range, even all the way to back then, Lake Herman Road, eh?
That in the way back, Druzer, that's my understanding. There was always that range back there. So
indeed,
and a hunting ground as well. So I mean, gunshots are not unusual.
Quick funny side story about that. I didn't know that it was a shooting range until I had gone to the crime scene with my wife. We went there, smoked a joint, we were hanging out, whatever. my dog's playing, and I'm thinking it's like private property, right? So I'm even throwing the ball into the over the fence for my dog to go in and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, whatever, you know. And I'm from Canada, so it's just like, oh,
yeah, there's no shooting ranges.
People don't give a shit, you know. This is America. Some dude with a mega hat comes on and yells at it. But so we're there for about a half an hour. I'm super ripped at this point, like smoked this huge blunt, and all of a sudden the gates open, and like this caravan of 30 cop cars come rolling out of this thing, and they're staring at me as I'm going by, and I'm like putting my joint out, like, oh my god, what's about to happen? And they got like 3D printed ARs and shit, looking intimidating as hell. And then the one guy looks at me, he can see that we're like, you know, obviously confused by this. I'm like apologizing for my dog. He's like, yeah, that's a shooting range, man. Don't worry about it. You're going to see like a lot more cars coming out. We literally had to sit there for 20 minutes and watch this caravan of military vehicles come out. And then the last dude, I finally calmed down. The last dude, I went up to him, is this about the Zodiac? and he just kind of looked at me and kept going. But
Yo.
And but yeah, it's funny. I had no idea that it was a shooting range up until that point, man. I thought I was in a lot of trouble for 10 seconds.
Hilarious. Yeah, I mean, so Druzer, you've heard my theory that when when they stop at Cherry and Maple and then it goes up one more block, like I just get the same feeling of how the assailant of Ray Davis just stole that taxi and drive it north. Like it's both taxis moving northward to some magnetic north, Mount Diablo theory that I haven't fully realized. But it could just be total random synchronicity. Also, the point that Rich brought up about the bruises on Stein's chest cavity. What is that? Is that him jerking the brake at Cherry and bumping into the wheel? And there's some kind of like unknown, situation there.
I do wonder. That is an interesting point that you bring up. I wonder if Zodiac had planned to pull Paul Stein's body out of the car and move the vehicle similar to the Ray Davis one. If he had, through the melee of messing around with the body and cutting the shirt, notices that the Robin kids are seeing him and has to bail on whatever plan, make the right to his getaway vehicle, right? But I mean, I get that I'm making a ton of logical steps there. It's just logical jumps there. It's just always interesting to hear a school of thought that I haven't heard of before, or at least something that falls in line with reality.
That'd be interesting.
Without a car right there, that would be a suicide plan, I think.
Totally. I mean, I agree. It's very risky for who I believe Zodiac to be. But I mean, I don't know. I think that's just kind of where my brain went as Ross was talking. Like, oh, maybe.
I like that idea.
Well, as a fiction lover, I considered it right away, like 10 years ago. But I don't think so.
Well, don't put me down like that, Druzer. I just thought of it. I thought it was smart. Come on.
No,
I mean that's what I'd do if I was making a movie.
I really like the idea of the Ray Davis copycat, either at Cherry or Wash, but I don't think he saw the Robbins kids, because don't you would have think like, dude, he wrote a massive manifesto essay about hiding in the bushes. He wouldn't have said, I saw the 3 kids in the upper window. Whereas when he supposedly made the phone call, he said like a guy was looking at him and saw his car. Maybe he made that story up, but he was fine with pointing out civvies and saying they were there.
Yeah. But it seems like if he's going to give you information that he wants you to know, he proves it. And if he doesn't, he just says it. So it's like a game of Simon Says.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but I mean, like, I think it'd be very difficult for the Zodiac to have seen the Robbins kids, because it was quite difficult for them to see him. I mean, do you guys remember how the exact number of feet away is? Is it like 50 feet, and they're on the second story window, right?
Well,
which is actually a very small window, and
I think it would be more noticeable at night, because if you're outside and then you see a light switch on in that daylight, or if they run downstairs and turn the light on or anything, there's more chance for something noticeable to happen as opposed to seeing that difference in the dark from the light.
Right, but was the light switch off when did the Robbins turn on some type of light when the Zodiac arrived? I haven't heard that before.
I don't know that they did.
I don't.
Yeah, again, I don't want to be.
I mean, I don't know,
like
Zach. I haven't heard that before.
The most persuasive argument I can muster is that when he sends his letter, he threatens school children.
Yeah.
So whether he saw them see him that night, or whether he read in the paper the next day that the youngsters saw him, is hard to say. And it may have been his plan all along. to get to a point where he had the press's attention and he could start his complete bullshit phase.
Yeah.
What does everybody think about that? I'm interested in the consensus opinion on whether or not the killing school children was directed towards the Robbins kids.
I've never thought that.
It could have been. I mean, he speaks in a lot of veiled, like the other thing I was brought up with a similar type of thing. You know, Ray Davis gets compared to Stein, but like Ratatich never gets brought up in the same light. I know that's not a cab driver, obviously, but it is a guy in a car. And then the other, was it Larry? Have you covered that one, Ned? Was it Larry Hargis?
Larry Hargis?
Am I getting so that he never gets brought up in association with Stein and Davis? So I mean, obviously you got the phone calls with Davis, so it's a little stronger, but.
Well, I mean, we have to give credit to Richard Grinnell. I mean, he certainly talked about Larry Hargis, and I mean, that's kind of like my go-to place for everything to learn about these possible connections, zodiacciphers.com. And
Same.
Richard really has put out sources on everything. Anytime I'm trying to learn about something new, about one of these possible connections, it's already on zodiacciphers.com. I've done very little on the murder of Larry Hargis, but that's just what I was thinking about when I said there are taxi cab murders. But it doesn't seem like taxi cab murders are extremely common in California, because when we actually look at the documented examples, or at the very least of ones that are somewhat similar to the Zodiac's activity, they're a little bit few and far between. Now, we actually have a comment here in the chat from Meg, who's making a comment about the streetlights at Presidio Heights. One thing that I had perhaps assumed in the past is that it would have been somewhat well lit because it's a neighborhood, but it's my understanding that there were two debilitating factors. One is that there really aren't that many streetlights in Presidio Heights, and the second one is that the lights would be blocked by a row of trees. And now,
actually, if you looked at the original destination at Washington, what was the first destination? Was
Maple.
Was Maple? Yeah, that one has a light under it, and the next block does not. So, and I just looked that up on Street View, and I don't know if that's changed over the years, but they seem like old lampposts. But I always thought maybe he didn't actually scout the location properly, or didn't take into account the light posts, and then moved it a block forward.
It was described as well lit by Falk. I don't mean to set Zach off by saying Falk.
Please do.
But regardless, it would be pools of light, not consistent light. The main light that is relevant to the sighting is the one inside the taxi cab, the dome light, which didn't have its lid on, so it was extra bright. It was described as a floodlight decades later by the Robbins. So while they would have had a lot of light to work with in terms of making an identification, it would have been directly overhead. So the guys...
But that light wouldn't have existed once he exited the vehicle.
Yeah.
See, I don't think Zodiac was like paranoidly like looking around at every house and every window, because that's not really what the Robbins kids describe. I think he probably just went with, if there's no one directly on the sidewalks that directly sees my face in a 10 to 20 foot radius that's walking directly towards me, it's going to be far enough from those windows that, hey, it was a guy with horn rim glasses that looks like Druzer with a crew cut, and in 1969 that's not going to go very far in Presidio Heights, where Shell Cavale looks like that. Probably Xenophon Anthony does down the street. There's one guy on every block that looks like
If you go watch a Vietnam documentary after that, it looks like the Zodiac fought the entire fucking war.
High school yearbooks, anything from that time period, you'll find 10,000 Zodiacs. So
it seems to be like more of an inspirational work, right? Where it's like, it's easy to tell what type of thing I can do to my appearance to blend in as easy as possible.
Yeah, perhaps the most relevant cab driver crimes to
Ned has something to say, I think.
The Paul Stein case happened less than 2 weeks before the Paul Stein crime. On September 30th, there was 2 cab robberies in San Francisco. The first one is a pickup at the airport and then taken downtown, I believe. And the cab driver was locked in the trunk and not harmed. That same day, later that day, a cab driver picked up a guy downtown and was driven out to the Presidio, mere blocks from the Washington and Cherry site, also locked in the trunk. Now, these seem like they have to be the same guy, and this is a day before rent's due. But one guy was described as 5'9", the other guy was described as 6'2". So who knows? I
don't put too much stock in the height thing, but MO I think means a lot more than height.
I think it speaks to a lot of frustration in the Zodiac case, where we have this range of descriptions, and it's easy to say, oh, these are different guys, but really it's probably just the nature of witness sightings.
Sure.
So that's the sort of a fun movie fiction type idea is that maybe these trunk cab robberies were committed by Zodiac, and he was trying to get an idea of police response time in various parts in San Francisco. Or maybe he had read about them and thought, well, if I want to commit a robbery that seems like it's just an everyday thing, this is the way to go.
Yeah, or at least buy time before my letters arrive and people attach it to me, right? Because it's the end result is that he wants to take credit for it. It's just he wants to build enough of a timeline in between where there's enough reasonable doubt that he can never be caught.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, only one of those trunk robberies we found, I think it was Gorilla Train, found an article about the first one. And the second one didn't come out until after the Zodiac crime. So I can't really say that Zodiac could have read about it or saw it on the news.
But Druzer, was there a suspect that was apprehended in those crimes that you're talking about?
Not for those two crimes, but for other the cab driver murder. I'm not sure whether it was Haggis or not.
No, I'm not thinking of that one, like the ones like around the Presidio Heights, or maybe I'm apprehended is the wrong word. There's like a suspect that was in question or something, and
no, they got him. They got him. He admitted it. His name was Robert Brommel.
Yeah, that's it.
And he lived downtown, so he is certainly from our 50 years in the future perspective, he's certainly the leading suspect.
Right. I think this really ties into something that I would like to talk about. I might be completely wrong about this, but you guys are like asking all these things about why is the Zodiac doing what he's doing at Presidio Heights. I'm going out on a limb here, but I think it's because he had a high level of crime scene awareness. Now, what Druzer's saying about how maybe he is like testing the waters earlier to learn about police response times, that could be absolutely brilliant. Like that could just be a very interesting way to tie it all together. But I think the Zodiac knew what he was doing. I don't think the Zodiac was dumb and just got lucky. I think that he was smart, but not a genius. And you guys are asking about, like, what is he going to do with the Robbins kids? Well, he knows that they're far enough away. They aren't going to be able to recognize him. And he knows how to confuse people. And I don't know if that comes from law enforcement training. Maybe it comes from criminal know-how, or maybe it's just because, like, he has some type of sociopathic instinct that is driving him to commit these crimes. So, but I think he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, he claimed that he disguised himself, so he doesn't care if he's recognized or not, because
when I do my thing.
Yeah.
It was a risk at all of these crimes. He took very little precaution to avoid being seen. He walks away casually on at least two of these crimes.
Yeah,
and all three that we have witnesses for. He just calmly walks away. Yep. So I don't think he would be saying stuff like I don't think he'd be saying that he wore a disguise or something if he wasn't concerned about having been seen. But that said, these are all reckless crimes.
Exactly, and that's what I was coming to with like Davis and Stein. You know what I mean? I love the dry run theory of just robbing those taxi drivers to see what would happen, but it's a lot of risk for the Zodiac, though. Like when you start adding on extra things to his assignment. You know, he gets caught or leaves some evidence at one of those robberies, it's going to mess it up. He's never going to be able to pull off Paul Stein. Whereas if he actually did Ray Davis himself or read the articles and knows about it, I think to Zach's thing is like, other than Davis and Stein, and you could maybe throw in Hargis there, which is Spring Valley. It's also 1970 San Diego. So I guess that would play into like a San Diego, Southern California thing with Swindles and Davis. If you had 5 or 10 taxi drivers where they just got shot in the head with a 9mm and just the things were obvious, it could be stronger. But you really only have Ray Davis with the 2 phone calls, and then everything that happens with Paul Stein, he kind of writes these long letters. At that point, he's already made phone calls. I was trying to find out what party that mayor of Oceanside belonged to, because Oceanside elections were done differently back then. Like some of you guys have seen my stuff on the Discord of looking into Vallejo politics and stuff like that. What I found out about this guy, I don't think I have his name up, but I emailed with Christy about him. He's a former movie theater owner that owned this big semi-famous movie theater in Oceanside. And that was essentially was him and his wife, their career was movie theater operators. Like, that makes you think of, the Castro Theater in San Francisco and all the theories people have about Zodiac being this movie head in the San Francisco Bay Area. So if Zodiac is assigned in Southern California, Oceanside, San Diego, Camp Pendleton, and he spends his weekends going to the theaters, does he know that mayor from owning that theater and it being his movie career? I haven't really heard anyone report that other than me bringing it up. So I kind of like that guy's career was the movies. It tracks with this whole Charlie Chan at Treasure Island and Most Dangerous Game movies and things of that nature. You know, all the other movie theories.
That's fascinating, Ross. Really, it is.
So it makes me.
We have a question from Cap Janks. You read it?
I don't know.
So
it wasn't a movie theater, wasn't it? To where Zodiac was picked. Oh, I thought it was a performance theater.
It was the theater district, and they
Mason and Geary.
They say Mason and Geary, but it could well have been.
It could be anywhere. I mean, Tosky seemed confident that it was at Mason and Geary was the pickup location, but there's only one mention of that ever in any of that. So I think most of that has to do with backtracking the $6.25, whatever the cab was at. So it's like he had left the airport, done the fare previously, gone downtown to look for another fare while he was waiting for another call. I believe the next call was at 9:45, which was to go to 900 Fifth Ave, something like that. And then he never made it to that. And then it was redispatched at a certain time at like 9:50. So he was dead by 9:55 regardless. It doesn't matter. But
it's obviously it's difficult for them to track where the exact location was based on the meter, because it wasn't shut off for like 45 minutes after the crime.
Even longer, or like 55, almost an hour. It was marked at 10:46, which I thought was, when I read that, I thought that was wild.
Yeah, so that's like an hour 15 maybe.
Yeah.
So I think it's a.
Can you just imagine what that looks like for the cops to be kind of sitting there holding down the scene, whatever, and be like, "Oh shit," and just like, check that out. It feels insane to me.
It is.
Yeah.
All right, though, about the Zodiac Killer being like at Mason and Geary, I've never had any reason to doubt that. What I think is so much more important from this is that they're the guys like talking about, like, was he at the movie theater or was he like going to a different type of theater? I don't know if we have any evidence to say the Zodiac was actually at a play. I mean, I did kind of take a liking to the statement once that the Zodiac could have gone to a play in the theater district and he kind of walks out during intermission to give himself an alibi. That's not an ounce of evidence to support that. But it's a creative theory. Sometimes people make these creative explanations. And but I also like to say thank you to Hypnotic Eye, for talking about the novel Killer on a White Horse, saying that it's something that is full of suspicious Easter eggs and clues. All right, I'll have a read. I hope it
sounds suspicious.
I always wondered, because Presidio was such a far walk away from Mason and Geary, and we saw Zodiac to have like walked with a lumber and a limp, and there's all this kind of conjecture surrounding his ability to move fast. I always wondered if other cabs, and he had to have been moving throughout the city in cabs and through public transportation throughout that day. And he did have a getaway vehicle near the Presidio, and we do all agree that he was picked up somewhere in the theater district. That's like a 45+ minute walk in the up and down hills of San Francisco. I don't know if you guys have ever walked around in San Francisco, but like you ain't gonna make it 45 minutes there and back and commit a murder and all that. You'd be pretty exhausted. So yeah, I thought that it was interesting that, you know, we look at these crimes that happened weeks in advance, but there doesn't seem to be, and maybe it's in the police reports and we don't have it, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of a microscope being put on the events throughout San Francisco that day.
They lost 2 days before they knew it was going to be a high-profile case, and by that time, they're done.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the sketch that did end up getting released, Druzer, you're going to know this better than me, there's lots of reason to believe that that sketch is an amalgamation of the other previous attacks on September 30th, the cab driver robberies where they were placed in the trunk.
I wouldn't say the sketch, but the description that accompanied it really rings of the earlier cab robberies that we were discussing. And in fact, it says in this crime, as in they're discussing multiple crimes.
Yeah, exactly. So there's lots of reason to believe that that sketch is some sort of an amalgamation, or that drawing, or just all that information is in some way being put into a vacuum and coming out in that sketch and that description.
Again, I would separate it from the sketch and say the description that accompanied it.
It's my understanding the sketch comes from the Robbins kids, that they are really the sole participants who gave us that information. And not even Officer Falk, but that is really just what the Robbins kids said he looked like. And it was drawn out by...
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just saying the interesting thing is that Falk's description doesn't seem to align with Robbins kids' description.
Some things are different. Some things I think are, you know, relatively similar.
Well, he showed it, obviously, and says it looks close. I don't know when those alterations come into, Druzer, with the Widow's Peak and the changing of the
2 days later. The 18th. The first one is the 13th. The other one is the 18th. 5 days later.
Whose observation is that based off? The Robin kids again, or did Falk?
The Robbins
kids again.
So it's revised.
Now the important thing for me is that the description that accompanied the first sketch put the age range at like 25 to 30. But in the only report we have from the night of the crime, the age is given as 40. So they clearly did not take everything the kids said and translate it into the sketch. And so a few days later, they wanted it revised.
But now, wait a second. I want to throw this at everybody. We can all get on Google Images and we can see a colorized version of the composite. There are lots of AI versions of the composites now. When I look at those, I'm looking at somebody who is 40 plus. 40 plus is not really, you know, the perfect thing for Zodiac forensically. But when you look at colorized composites, I always think that they look like someone who's over the age of 40. What do you guys think?
I think that scales against your perception of the time. I think today, yes. I think back then somebody looked a lot older for a 30-year-old. I mean, I think Brian Hartnell could have been argued for late 30s, early 40s when he was in his mid-20s in some ways, especially if I only saw him in a glimpse.
Yeah.
You think so? Like when you watch the video of Brian in the hospital, you think he could have passed for 40?
Maybe not 40. I'm trying not to like jump off 30s. A cliff here in that. But yeah, he could be in his 30s. I wouldn't be surprised. He could be a guy that took care of himself for sure. I mean, it's not out of this world to think that. And it's one of those things where, you know, I see people all the time. You look this way. Oh, you're actually this old. You know, it's just enough. And that's also discussing it in this way where we're looking at them and we're taking in this fluid information and our biases are allowing to connect in. Now, when I'm just watching somebody walk by and then I have to think about it later, I mean, our brains are literally built to fill in gaps and make assumptions and do that stuff. I think I get backed into a corner a lot when I throw shade on descriptions and eyewitness testimonies. And I'm not calling these people liars. I think that they're very much think that they're telling the truth.
I agree.
It's just hard for me to put stock into their memory. I mean, all the time I'll be arguing with my wife and she'll be like, no, this happened, and that. And then she'll place the facts out for me and I'll go like, fuck, you're right, I'm wrong. So
always,
you know,
never happens to me.
You know, and then we talk about these sketches. We talk about these sketches as if we're looking at a photo of somebody, and we're just not. We're looking at somebody's thoughts of opinion of what somebody looked like in a highly stressful situation.
The best thing you can say about the sketches is that they don't exhibit any weird features. They didn't describe a huge nose, huge ears, huge lips, whatever. No. But basically all we have to go on is he was a white guy. He was wearing glasses. He didn't have a beard at the time. He was anywhere from 20 to 40, anywhere from 20 to 50.
Yeah.
And I do think based on other criminals, and I mean, given they don't have a lot of the same sexual motivations, or Zodiac doesn't have the same sexual motivations as a lot of these criminals that we've caught. I mean, Zodiac stands out as a he's an outlier in that way. But, I've always really harped on the fact that I think that the descriptions and the eyewitnesses and the weird stuff that we can see before and after crimes are going to be of more value than the things when the actual crimes are taking place. And the crimes are taking place at times where the killer has already done his research. He knows that this is the perfect time to do this, and he's proven himself to be astute at this. So I mean, we may sit there and assume that, oh, this is such a wildly unsafe situation. But I mean, we had guys like the Golden State Killer hanging out in people's houses for 8+ hours. We've had BTK doing, running through neighborhoods and doing this. It's if somebody is out there trying to hunt somebody and trying to find the perfect, we got human beings that kill lions. It's not difficult for me to believe that these points in time in which the crimes are committed are just exactly that, a perfect time to do it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Ned, but when Falk makes this like possibly graying hair at the base of the whatever,
he says that in 2007.
He barely glimpses him through like a shine of the headlights in a moment when like maybe we locked eyes, maybe we didn't. I can't remember. Oh, by the way,
Zelm says nothing.
Sitting right next to me, Zelms didn't really see anything, but there's only one guy on the street, and so I don't know what to make of that.
I hate Falk's guts, man.
What confuses me? Go ahead, Ned.
You know where I stand on that, Ross. I actually do think that Falk talked to the Zodiac, and it just that Zodiac may have said that one sentence. Oh yeah, he went that way, something like that, and the whole story about the cover up, trying to protect reputations. I mean, you guys clearly have a different.
Personally, I think a lot of things happened in a scramble in those 31 days between the crime and the memorandum, and it's like it's fluid information and people trying to protect egos and backtrack and build timelines and also do the right thing at the same time. So it's very difficult to. Putting any type of conspiratorial lens on what happened there, I think is difficult because, again, I think it's just a lot happening.
Yeah, that's the whole Falk and Publicity back and forth. Ned, I'm just strictly taking Falk's statement at face value. Like if you go by, okay, the lights, gently brushed over them. And by the way, he was wearing engineer boots. He looked like he had a Welsh miner's body build. And he possibly had graying hair at the base of his thing. So whatever, fine. That's what he said. Cool. I'm not going to comment on that right in this moment. But
can we just be clear for whoever's listening that he said this in 2007, right?
Yeah, I mean, just you can nail that down for him. Fine by me.
I just want to say it. I just want to say that.
But Brian says he thought he heard a younger voice, and then I think Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, Druzer also thought it was semi-younger. So that did open up the door to me to Morf suspect because I was kind of where you were at. Like I'm pre-programmed to think like 35, 45 range. Then I started thinking maybe I got this wrong because if everyone's hearing a younger voice, I mean, you could wear a graying hair wig, as Zach and Vincent have reminded us. I hate wigs with a passion, but there's things you can do to look older. You know what I mean? Are you going to be able to change your voice to sound younger? And that would be more difficult, I would argue,
I completely follow everything you're saying, Ross. The only point that I made is when I look at colorized composites, I think they're depicting an older man, much older. But I completely admit that there is contradictory evidence. I mean, let alone Mike Majot's statements. He's estimating the guy might be like 25 to 30. Partnered with Brian Hartnell's statements, the voice he heard was age 20 to 30. And yes, I've also heard that from Nancy Slover that it was somebody on the younger side. I forget the exact ages, but didn't she also say that like mid-20s to around 30 or something like that? Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I don't know the exact, but I thought it was like around that. So it's interesting.
A younger Zodiac. And that is something that I struggle with so much, like trying to estimate the Zodiac's exact age because complete contradictions. I mean, at Presidio Heights, he seems older. At Blue Rock Springs and Lake Berryessa, he seems younger. Lake Herman Road, we have no idea. Absolutely no idea. So,
what were we going to say, Druzer?
He said these things in his memo.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
the Welsh ancestry, he said in 97, I think, or 89.
I'm not a big
some
fan
of these
that
some of these
comment.
things.
Some of the
White male
statements, like Officer Falk does have the memo that has the witness description that goes back to 69. Now, what I think Zach was saying is that some of the details were added in the later documentaries.
I just think it's important. People talk about Falk's description and the 4 times that we have information from him, which is 2007, whatever that documentary was. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. The memorandum and the night of. Like those are the 4. Those are the 4.
This is what he says in the memo in November 69. White male adult, 35 to 45, about 5'10", 180 to 200, medium heavy build, barrel chested, medium complexion, light colored hair, possibly graying in the rear, may have been lighting that caused this effect. Crew cut, wearing glasses, dressed in dark blue waist length, zipper type jacket, navy or royal blue, elastic cuffs and waistband, slip part way up, brown wool pants, pleated type, baggy in rear, rust brown. May have been wearing low cut shoes. So unless
like Cooper.
Well, it sounds like he prepared notes on the evening. Otherwise,
how would all that
memory
details stick,
Yeah.
D.B. Cooper was wearing rust-colored pants, right? As well as perhaps a similar kind of shoes.
D.B. Cooper's too skinny.
At any rate, there are a lot of parallels with Falk's initial description, albeit a month later, with the Robbins kids who also saw the red tint in the hair, the light hair. Brian Hartnell noticed the pleated pants with elastic cuffs, obviously boots. So I don't know.
But the connections are made between Robbins and Hartnell there too. You don't need to bring in Falk there for that connection to be made.
Well, I don't know that the Robbins noted pleated pants, but
I don't think they could have seen that detail. I mean, you've seen how high that window is, Zach. I don't think you can see someone's foot cuffs.
I don't think anyone's.
I don't think it's that out of this world to think that they saw pleated pants versus whatever else they saw.
I mean, it's harder at night, though.
This is something that I think is very important. We're talking about pleated pants. Some people like to look at their Zodiac Killer suspect and they pull up a photo of him. See, my suspect wore pleated pants. Zodiac wore pleated pants. That's evidence. This is a supporting point.
Yeah.
No, I don't ever need to hear that.
And to backtrack, the only point that I'm trying to make is that I find that people tend to funnel Falk's comments and say that as if they all came out at once, and they do tend to get more detailed over time, which I think is very suspicious. They suspicious in the sense that, like, I don't know if you're drawing off your own memory, if you're remembering the last memory. I don't think you're sitting there trying to concoct some lie and make $1 million someday or get $5K from the Discovery Channel or some shit. It's
but
more
if you're reading articles, post-event articles, then it's stuck in your subconscious.
Yeah, and you remember the memory, and that happens. That's just psychology.
Memory changes.
Yeah, so that's all I'm really trying to say is that we should be careful about what we're comparing and when the statements were made and to what.
The light, the graying hair may have been a lighting. I mean, that's probably one of the most peculiar observations. I've never heard of that in any case. I mean, it makes sense. Like, I get what his point is, but it seems like a peculiar point.
How did he see the back of his head if he only drove by him? He's driving and turning? Like, I don't understand.
Perhaps.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right, because at the end of the block, he gets the information.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I'm trying to tell you what the fuck he's talking about.
Go, Druzer.
Well, I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole of was there a botched dispatch or not, but assuming there was, because it seems to explain everything, he gets that at where is it? At Cherry Street. And that's when he learns that the person he just saw was possibly the Zodiac, and that's when he turns around and he sees the back of the head, and apparently now the guy's approaching a residence. Now, I mean, I don't have all this trust with Falk, but why the hell he would make that up, I don't know.
No, I think that tracks, but I gotta say, Zach's point of driving straight forward while looking backwards is absolutely hilarious. You know what I mean?
That guy's that back of the head is Welsh.
Well, it wasn't the back of the head. Now it was the back of the body build.
It was the pleated pants. The pants were Welsh.
Yeah.
I think Falk's had a family member. Maybe it was a father-in-law who was a Welsh miner.
So that's why it got.
That's why he has this super specific.
Father-in-law, right?
I love it, man. Let's keep talking about that. Yeah. That's awesome.
No, I mean, so hey, if you want to bring Gaviota in the mix, your boy Vern Smith is a miner up in Lompoc. I don't know.
There you go.
Well, boom, shakalaka. You're welcome, Zodiac community.
Yeah, we could move off from Presidio and how it relates to Ray Davis because that's how we got connected here and whatnot. But my opinion of Falk and that whole thing is basically based on the information that I have, and again, all of this can be proven wrong if more stuff gets made public. But at the end of the day, I think Falk was the only officer mentioned in the police report that wasn't a responding officer right there at the scene. So when Zodiac comes out and basically embarrasses the police, and there's all this, I understand that there's maybe not public pressure, or the cops don't feel this like particular need to solve the crime, or that well, obviously they do, but the public's not putting this unnecessary pressure on them to do so. There's got to be pressure to some extent being put on these guys, and especially after the letters are being after Zodiac is writing letters that are basically rubbing their nose in it. I feel like Falk just ends up being the fall guy and saying like, oh yeah, he's the guy that Zodiac saw, and because of the false APB, these are the reasons why he was able to get away with this, and yeah, and it's tough to put it into an exact timeline. It's the only thing that makes sense in terms of motivations for me.
It could be possible Zodiac saw Palisetti. You know what I mean? The kid said he was basically walking away in the background in Palisetti. Well, I mean, it doesn't mean they talked or anything like that.
I know. It's just there's the back and forth between Palisetti and Falk's statements, and just that basically, if they were sitting at a table, it sounds like they would just get into a pretty heated argument based on the history between the two of them. I've never seen them talk one-on-one, but I mean, they do seem to really, really negate one another. Palisetti doesn't seem to have as much of a reason to lie, considering he showed up and was there and tried to help. And I mean, regardless of how we want to judge his actions and going up the street, trying not to get his head blown off, whatever. I mean, whether he was scared or not, or wanted to be brave, I don't think that we can hang a piano over his head over that. But Falk's being the only mentioned officer in the police report, and then him being the one to release the memorandum 31 days later, I just find to be riddled with suspicion.
Yeah, I'm not really. I'm kind of like 50-50 on it. I just kind of take the information and just, hey, like you said, if it pans out somewhere and it goes somewhere, great. If it's just spinning the wheels, it is what it is. I
just don't get it from there. Like, he's the only guy to put his hand up. Yeah, I'll be in a TV show and tell you some more shit. Sure.
I think it's very possible that the police read Zodiac's claim and asked Falk if he saw anyone.
Yeah, talk to all the guys who were dispatched. Yeah, right, exactly.
Like they came out. Was it the same day, Zach, that that it was printed in the paper and
yes,
Falk released his memo? So that's not a coincidence. Either Falk read the paper and said, "Oh shit, I better come forward."
That's my understanding.
Or the police see it in the letter,
or the police wanted to make sure that there was a piece of paperwork out to the public that explained this mistake.
Yeah, but all they said was that's horse shit. There's no way.
Fair enough, but I think Occam's razor is right down the center on that. I don't think it's conspiratorial to think the other way based on the timeline, and that's just me.
Yeah, we have a thing in the chat here. Yeah, Zelms unfortunately died a few months later.
So the line of duty.
January 1st, 1970.
That's
so
the only somebody asking what happened that night. Yes, reportedly his wife Diana did, and the story that he told her was the thing about how he and Falk talked to the Zodiac, and that's why Falk waited 1 month to come forward, because once he realized that this enormous blunder had been made, he withheld the information because he was trying to protect their reputations, and this was given in her interview to Howard Davis.
Yeah, and it's great that Howard was able to.
Cops never try and do that.
But the other person who spoke to Zelms about it was Falk, according to Falk, and according to Falk, Zelms didn't remember anything.
Didn't see anything. Yeah, I mean, anyway, as much as I like
it, saw the back of his head, and then they just stopped talking.
Yeah.
Well, I should elaborate a little bit. Falk got an undetermined response from Zelms on it, and he says that's why he included the line in the memo that he wasn't sure whether Zelms actually saw it or not. Obviously, there was no big action taken after this memo. There was a month and a half before Zelms perished, and there's no talk that we've heard of the police talking to Falk about it further, or getting more from Zelms, who should have had the better look because he didn't have the responsibility of driving.
100%.
I have a lot of
was on his side of the car.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for detectives, and especially like people trying to solve murders and rapes and terrible crimes out in the world. But when you start to get into departmental thinking and people trying to protect an overarching system,
Politics.
then politics of it starts to fall apart for me in terms of and just in terms of truth.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so Zach doesn't like when I quote David Fincher 2007 Zodiac, but Falk
it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Falk is in the documentary giving his observation as well as Publicity. You'd have to assume that Fincher and the producers and Graysmith and the writers would have spoken to Falk and these people. So they obviously put that scene in there, Druzer, where the higher ups ask him, and they were like, yeah, no, we didn't see anything. It's like a 2-minute long scene, but
and he is portrayed fairly negatively, I would say, as a person in the movie.
So
the whole bit was completely jaded in a good way because it was very dramatic. But they made the teenagers small children, and they put in a scene that we have no verification of, and from the sources that they had just spoken to before they made the film.
Yeah, right. That's kind of what I was getting at. How much is like you had all these primary resources, and then you come to writing and shooting. You're like, oh, we just do whatever we want for this scene. We got to get to the next one.
Fincher was no expert on the Zodiac case. I can assure you.
Yeah, and personally, I hear a lot of malice in Falk in his later interviews and the documentaries and things. He was pretty upset about how he was portrayed with Graysmith. I imagine he was probably pretty upset how he was portrayed in the movie. And I'm not trying to throw shade on the guy in that way. He's a human being, but at a certain point, you just get angry and you start putting in information, and that your motivation becomes to protect yourself and how you feel as opposed to solving the crime. And I feel like that happened way before 2007.
Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but in the doc, doesn't the interviewer ask Falk, did Graysmith ever talk to you before the book? And he said, no, he never talked to me, saying that like Graysmith just like kind of just went with whatever for his Falk.
So it's just another example of the back and forth and weird things. Now, obviously, Graysmith is a bigger liar than Falk in the way that Graysmith is trying to sell a book, and Falk is just trying to protect his reputation, or at least according to what I think. But,
Graysmith is demonstrably a liar. Falk is not.
100%.
I'm always curious as to why Pam Huckabee doesn't catch more flack.
Because she has mental issues, and it's just really sad.
And she talks in a way that is very very non-threatening. So if anybody were to just do some giant expose trying to tear her down, they'd be viewed as some type of bully or something like that. And also, let's be very clear, Pam Huckabee is not a witness to anything, so her comments are really irrelevant, especially when it's partnered with the fact that she can't verify everything, she can't substantiate this stuff. Somebody left a coffin on my porch. Wait, somebody left a coffin on your porch? Well, can we see it? No,
I mean, it's crazy, obviously.
And, it's like, but I really think it's because it's the way that she presents herself, where if anybody were to actually challenge everything that she's saying, they'd come across looking as some type of bully, and they just don't want to do that. The easiest thing to do is to just ignore her and say that she's unreliable.
Right. But so in the wake of that, though, and which is fair and fine, I can appreciate that, but I do find, watching a lot of Beeson content or Ross talk about Cheney, that he gets thrown under the bus a lot as being this primary resource for a lot of Graysmith's writing. And not to say that he's not one of the primary resources, but Pam Huckabee seems to be responsible for a lot of the liberties taken as well with what I mean, with a multitude of things, it would take too long to go over the list. But
like Fincher, I don't think Graysmith, at least in the later years, was trying to solve the case. He was trying to create a dramatic story,
push a narrative
he did.
that
So he said he interviewed all kinds of people that we know he didn't.
Exactly.
He's not an investigator. He is a director.
A fiction writer.
We can all appreciate
what did Graysmith say about that? He thought it was an outdoor game of chess or some shit, and like
he said, the Zodiac frequently used the term outdoor game of chess, and I mean, that was one thing where I'll give credit to Michael Butterfield when he called him out by saying the Zodiac, didn't really do that. I still haven't found the exact quotation in a letter where the Zodiac is saying he's playing a game of outdoor chess.
The closest we have to that is the very disputed 1978 Scotch tape letter, where he does talk about the author. I'm not saying it was Zodiac, but the author talks about playing chess with the cops. Yeah, he goes on quite a bit about it. Says he has sets all over the place.
I'm sure. Good.
Well, I mean that's how you can.
Sounds like kill
good conscience. It's how you can, in good conscience, as a writer, take something and say, well, this was in the police report. This was in a questioned letter.
Exactly. That
you can protect yourself a little bit there. Similar to how a memorandum gets released on the same day that an article gets released. I
don't think Fincher believes that Zodiac used a silencer at Blue Rock Springs.
Right.
There's evidence to suggest that he didn't. There was ear witnesses.
Right, exactly.
Or one ear witness. But it's in the police report. You have every right as a dramatic filmmaker to include that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm sure Graysmith's argument would be, well, he read a whole bunch of unreleased Zodiac letters that none of us ever saw, according to himself.
Yeah, but time has proven that wrong.
Well, we don't know what he's seen. We just know what's most likely, and we know what the police have validated and what they haven't.
Absolutely, but it's very easy for him to leave the door open. They let me in there, guys. I saw a whole bunch of stuff you guys haven't seen.
That sounds like a lot of people in this case,
opportunity. Because I want to just kind of ask you all directly, what do you think Graysmith was about? Do you think he just got tired of being a cartoonist and production assistant, and he thought, like, hey, here's my chance to have a new career as a true crime writer, or as you guys said, novelist? Or do you think that this is something where he's actually genuinely investigating Zodiac, then he just has some type of breaking point where he realizes that I can't solve this case on my own, and furthermore, law enforcement doesn't seem to be solving the case, so people want to hear my story, I might as well just give them what they want? What do you think Graysmith is all about?
Who wants to take that?
Druzer has his hand up. Go.
Combination of both. I think he knew that he had real talent for writing and pursued it, as opposed to where his career was in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. And when he started writing his book, we needed a Zodiac book. This information hadn't been compiled in a comprehensive way.
Yep.
And I think we all know or have experienced, I've certainly experienced how maddening this case can be. Like you start tripping down the holes, and before you know it, 10 years has passed, you still haven't published your book, and you have all of this information, which may be true, maybe not true. Like, I'm sure he did a lot of interviews that were relayed honestly in his book, and he didn't know what to make of them. He went from one suspect to another, and at some point, I think he had convinced himself that it was Alan.
Yeah.
And, maybe, 15 years later, now we have the internet. Thanks to Tom Voigt, he has the...
You're saying that Tom Voigt created the internet.
No, thanks to...
the Zodiac internet.
Thanks to authorities doing a major... document dump in the late 90s, and thanks to Tom for putting them online, also Mike Butterfield, also Mike Rodelli, etc. Now Graysmith has more information which fit into his second book, and at that point I think he knew that Arthur Lee Allen was not the Zodiac, and pushed forward anyway in a very shaky shady way.
Cavalier,
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, then, Druzer, that sounds like fraud, to be honest, if he's
Yep.
like misrepresenting his narrative and he's intentionally saying things that he does not believe and trying to make the audience think that he believes something like that. That
Yep.
just sounds like pure deception.
Yeah, which is something he was known for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Voight
I mean, he
sued
does this
Graysmith
with everything. Like I go
Zodiac
over this all the
unmasked.
time on Black Box Online Radio about how just anybody who follows the other true crime cases that he talks about just will highlight it when he puts out a book. And that was when I realized that Graysmith is kind of doing what Ross said about trying to be a novelist, and he's writing those things to be entertaining. But with Zodiac, you would really think that he must have started out with some genuine curiosity. You know, he
Yeah.
must have started out with actually having some fascination with it. Because the way he writes about Zodiac, there's a certain degree of passion that's put into it. But also, I mean, one thing that shocks me, no book about the Zodiac Killer for 17 years? 1986 is when it comes out, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
He
there
doesn't
are
want to be pressed.
what's that 79 book or something, but it's not like a definitive authority on the case. Is that
I just mentioned that.
what's the name of that one that came out in 79? But you know, it's
I
not
have no idea.
it's certainly not on par with Graysmith's Zodiac. But if this were the electronic age and there was a Zodiac set of homicides, there would be a book written next year.
Yeah, well, the true crime genre hadn't, really crystallized so much. We had Helter
Sure.
Skelter in, what was that, early 70s, and, was incredibly successful.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, but full of BS.
absolutely.
But it showed there was I think what Druzer is saying, it showed there was a lane and it showed there's numbers. You hit it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily be true crime if it's about a real case and it's your narrative and it sells.
He may have looked at it as true as he could get it. Like there's obviously there's great areas of unknown, and rather than writing nothing, he writes what seems plausible, and he adds in, the guy was stocky, the night was foggy. He embellishes these things,
the details.
Yeah, but it wasn't
Let's look at something else that happened before that, because we had Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, and I'm basing a lot of this on the movie Capote, but he just openly said the reason why he wanted to write that book was he wanted to create a new genre, the nonfiction novel, to write about a true crime story with the flow of a novel talking about the Clutter murders. And this is in the 20th century still, so this is kind of like going onward as a predecessor to a lot of the things that we're going to see in the 70s and 80s. You brought up Helter Skelter with Vince Bugliosi, best-selling true crime book of all time for some reason, and then that is just showing that these things are very profitable. People want to hear about this, and also there's just a market for these types of stories. Now, whether they're true or false, that almost seems beside the point for the people who are trying to make money.
100%.
And like us, a lot of it was unknowable for Graysmith. Like the scenes where he's led into the evidence room and he gets full access to the documents, and he sort of reiterated in the latest piece of garbage documentary on Netflix that's true. But I don't.
The guy told him I gotta get a
believe it.
coffee, and then I realized, he's just leaving me in here by myself. Wow, how lucky!
Yeah, he's a great writer, but I don't believe that for a second. And so I think he was on his own. I think trying to put this together from newspapers, and he probably had several conversations with Avery and maybe Toschi.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to take this one, Zach?
I was just going to say, I think life unfolds chaotically, right? And I think motives are fluid and they change. And I think he probably stumbled upon a gold mine in the way of, and like Druzer said at the beginning, it's all filled with integrity and really great. He wants to solve it. He wants to compile all the data and write a book and do that stuff. And then at a certain point, you become pot committed. You're talking to publishers, and just like we said, Ross, now you're bringing in a political side to it. It's less about personal interest. It's less about
becomes business.
And becomes business, and becomes more about trying to fill a bubble that you've now gone and inflated for everybody. And now you got to fill with substance, right?
100%.
So, I mean, it's similar to what my opinion is of Cheney, where I think, or a lot of the things in this case, is that stuff starts off with the greatest of intentions and including the murders themselves. And I don't mean to say that they started off with good intentions, but I think that those intentions change as time goes.
Sure.
I think that I don't really buy the theories that this is all, that whoever Zodiac was, that it was all planned out. That it was this, like, he knew and he executed it perfectly.
Yeah,
and,
step by
you
step.
know, I feel like things are far more fluid. I feel like, you know, what we know about Golden State Killer, BTK, again, all these other guys, is that, you know, they're fulfilling these fantasies, and then they find out that this fantasy isn't enough, so they have to replay this fantasy, or they're unable to talk about the fantasy, so they got to go and replay it this way, or they find these ways.
Keep pushing it further.
Yeah, and pushing it further, but it's not as if they have this, like, Monopoly board where they know the 5 spaces ahead. And, you know, it's they're just living like most of us are.
Yeah.
Right.
More,
and I just don't see why somebody
right.
going out to commit a murder is the same as trying to find a job or anything else. I mean, most of us are victims of circumstance, right? You're going to try and find it. You want the particular job. You have to settle for this particular one because it's good enough, or whatever the case is.
And how impulsive are some of those actions. But to answer your question, Ned, I agree. You know, if you're essentially a primary, like Graysmith was, as in he's sitting in the cartoon room drawing for the strips, and then the Halloween card comes in, you know, and you're sitting there and this stuff. Now, I know, like, it was done dramatically in the film, but, you know, he's still in the movie. He probably saw the handler come in and drop off some of the stuff. So he probably did see some first person stuff. You know, he obviously draws that first, you know, not the first, but he draws a picture of the Lake Berryessa executioner thing. That's kind of what, you know, puts him somewhat on the map. And then, as Druzer said, do I have this hidden talent for writing? Okay. So as you guys said, I think the movie chronicles most of the Graysmith story arc pretty well, as far as him becoming obsessed with the case and all that stuff. I love Gyllenhaal's performance. I think
it's just every single conversation he ever had.
Right. You know, so I don't need to see every word they've ever spoken, but I think in terms of events, that probably does cover most of his obsession with the case. When it comes into business, here's the problem, right? Because isn't his original suspect William Joseph Grant? So
Yes.
According to Horan, his William Joseph Grant manuscript got rejected by the company, by the print press. So he switches to Arthur Lee Allen. He pivots, and like Ned said, maybe he thought it was Arthur Lee Allen at one point, or maybe while writing and during production of the book, he did think it was. But he also leaves that William Joseph Grant chapter in there randomly. You know, I feel like that's kind of how they show the Rick Marshall red herring scene in the movie. It's like, oh, Rick Marshall's upstairs. Who's on the floorboards? You know, it's like that's the same moment I have when I read that. Like, I thought you're pitching Ken Hall Star to me, and then all of a sudden I have this guy making mangled faces on the highway at the highway patrol officer through the window. It's like, it's such a weird moment. Like, okay, like it's like a curveball, right? It's like, I thought we're doing Arthur Lee Allen, then this guy's randomly in the cars in the chapter, and then we're back to ALA for the rest of the book. So that bespeaks to me that, like, yeah, you know, they told him, like, hey, you need a sexier suspect. He comes up with Allen, who lives right down the street at 32 Fresno. He's pretty close to Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs. On paper, he's stockier. That's what Graysmith's going to keep telling you. Some of the stuff fits. I mean, do I necessarily believe that he was following Arthur Lee Allen around in the night while Allen was changing cars in front of him? Because if that was the case, why wouldn't you just follow where the car is going to a crime? And then you found, like, what
you just stop at the car switch, like, yeah, what?
that makes no sense. So you follow him to a Santa Rosa hitchhiker murder. Okay, this guy's actually a murderer. Some other random non-canonical, you know, say like a Hargis or someone shot in a car or something. You know what I mean? Great, that leads somewhere. But then, like you guys said, I haven't read Zodiac Unmasked, but when it gets to that point, you know, like Ned said, now you have internet, and, you know, now you have the book deals. By this point, the movie has already been created off of a script written off your first book.
And he's established himself as the authority too at that point. Right. Like, if he does anything further, he's gonna fall under more scrutiny. Like, he has all these things to lean on in the past. Oh, the police reports weren't this. He could make all these assumptions, blah blah blah, and he just kind of sits in people's minds as this, like, top authority in Zodiac. Well, in reality, I feel like if he were to keep writing books and doing this and be in the Zodiac sphere, he would publicly get outed very quickly and probably lose a lot of credibility, not be getting Netflix deals and fucking whatever.
So Voight sues him for, I guess, plagiarism for Unmasked, and Voight won from what he told me, and it wasn't a lot of money. But the best allegory comparison that you guys brought up is Vincent Bugliosi's novel Helter Skelter, well, I call it a novel, whatever, make your own, I haven't read it, make your own judgment, is the same thing. What Zach just said. Vincent establishes himself as a Manson case expert because he's the prosecuting prosecution, until you later find out that his entire narrative that he created to win in the courtroom really doesn't have that much to do with the real events of what happened with Manson and the Manson family, as far as, interviewing all the primary, resources and stuff. So he creates his own narrative, exactly what Zach
Dude,
said.
it's like
the
Jerry
way
not racing.
created his own narrative, So
it's like Jerry choosing not to race in Seinfeld. As
I
long
choose
as he
not to
doesn't
run.
race, he's the winner. He's the god.
I agree.
It's the exact. It's exactly that. You know what I'm saying?
If we can reassess to the topic at hand, gentlemen. So at Ray Davis, there's 22 long rifle ammunition, much like the Swindles murder and the Gaviota Beach murders of Dominguez Edwards. We all know that because it's carried forward into Lake Herman Road when Zodiac writes his evidence lists of things that only I and the law enforcement will know, the police, which is like super. He goes out of his way, Druzer, to list it twice. Super X ammo was the brand, but did he say brand twice? It was Winchester and then or Western, whatever he said, and then Super X. So I can't remember if he used different words for the
You mean in the Lake Herman Road confession?
Yeah. I can't remember if he said brand twice or if he said it's Super X, but I think type.
Oh, the brand was Super X brand? Like that's what you mean?
No, like he said it was Super X, but he also said I think it was Western, right? So
I think that's the same thing, isn't it? Or were they? I get those confused.
I'm not a gun guy. I don't know.
This is the problem. The Winchester Western Super X had a buyout, so you can find Winchester Super X boxes and you can find Western Super X boxes, and they look exactly the same. The only name change is the distributor.
I'm not sure how much stock to put into the whole weapon, the ammo thing. Now, obviously, he knows, saying the type of ammo that was used shows that you have knowledge of the crime. But like, how rare is ammo in the States at this time?
People make the argument that 22 long is the most common. It's the cheapest. It's small game ammunition, so it would be the most widely available. So
you disagree, Ned?
No, I agree that's why it's probably used very frequently because of it's easily available. All the reasons that Ross just said. Like I think it's not an accident that these murders were committed with 22 caliber long rifle ammunition. And
right, so it shows that these crimes are being committed because they're cheap and widely available, not so much that they are being committed by the same person.
I mean, I have to go with that now unless I get some more evidence. But now, where is it in the debut letter that he says Winchester ammunition? We all know he says Western and he says Super X.
Right, but it is Western. My point was Western or Winchester got bought out by Western on the product. My point was that does he say the brand was Western and then the brand was Super X? What word did he use, or did he say type and brand? I'm trying. It might be a mixture of those.
Definitely brand, but
you guys know where I'm going at. He said brand name 5 times and ammo was made by. Okay, so it was nice one. Thank you. So ammo was made by. You know what I mean? That gets at the distributor. So that's obviously Western at the time after the buyout. My point is, what is the likelihood that Swindles are eliminated with 22 LR? Ray Davis is eliminated with 22 LR. It's carried over to Gaviota Beach, and then he uses it at Lake Herman Road. I always felt like that was a nod from Lake Herman Road. And again, pure speculation. I'm sure Druzer will kill me on this. I always felt like that was a nod to the non-canonicals. Of course, he never uses the 22 LR again in the canonicals, and I don't know if that's because mistakes are made at Lake Herman Road with Betty seemingly running for a period and almost letting her escape, or some other mistake,
Well,
I think he was intelligent enough to. Oh, sorry.
No, just if he has a problem with Betty Lou running away, he certainly didn't have a problem with Linda and Robert running away. If this is the same killer who also committed the Swindle murders, then that was also committed with 22 long, right?
He did have a problem, though. My point is he had a problem at both times because Linda ran away, he shot her in the back, he possibly got punched in his face and bled all over the crime scene. It looks like he almost let Betty do the same. You know, obviously.
And so you mean
David,
he's had these mistakes frequently with 22 long. So now he's like, all right,
exactly.
you know, I'm just going to get a different gun that's more powerful because this doesn't seem to be working.
Exactly.
All right, so at least we're on the same page, Ross. At least I follow you.
I ain't saying I'm right. Go ahead, Drews.
Well, just to sort of close out on the Ray Davis, Paul Stein connections, two things that haven't been mentioned but were just alluded to is if it was the same killer in both instances, he learned, it would seem, from the Ray Davis murder that he was in a better position in the front seat. Mm-hmm. Ray Davis was killed in the back seat, and it seems that there was an errant shot, maybe because Ray Davis saw him in the rear view mirror bringing up his gun. He was able to move at the last second, and now we have a bullet through the windshield.
Exactly.
In the Paul Stein crime, although this is still heavily debated by people who bring up good points, it seems to me and a lot of people, like law enforcement, that when the shot was fired, that the killer was in the front seat. So just as we see an evolution in MO from Lake Herman Road to Blue Rock Springs, we can infer a learning from Davis to Stein, if that was the same guy. And the other thing that we didn't mention is in the second phone call in Oceanside, he threatens to kill a bus driver. And this prompts law enforcement to set armed dudes on the buses for a week, 2 weeks.
I think it's Camp Pendleton Marines, and that almost seems like an escalation of just having regular, police or whatever. So,
yeah, so it's dangerous business to take these very probable coincidences and stack them on top of each other and say, now we have a connection. But when we do that with Ray Davis, there does seem to be some substance.
And I would agree with the corrections, because we can take it to Gaviota Beach now that we're hour and a half in. If he makes the same correction from Dominguez Edwards to Hartnell Shepard, has the 45 on him now, as Druzer said. If the long rifle caused an issue with Bobby Dominguez when they got up close and he couldn't sight him because Bobby started hitting him, you know what I mean? He was too, like, if they're chest to chest, you know what I mean? How is he going to get the rifle and aim it directly at Bobby's head or his chest? He may have got hit a few times because of that. Morf brought this up in my Zodiac speaking. So he shows up to Lake Berryessa with the 45 in the holster, stands way back. When Brian says to her, I think I can get the gun, she tells him no. Zodiac steps back a bit after that because he may have either heard the comment or basically knew what he was saying, even if he didn't hear the comment, And then he never gets close enough again to get in grabbing range. So
I have a question. Ross, could you lay out for me why we're so confident that the killer had taken some hits or been wounded in some way?
It looks like there's a scuffle in the dirt from where like somebody was knocked down or whatever, and then 75 feet up the bluffs there's blood found. It doesn't really make sense that the blood would have got on the killer from anything else, but let me back up. Bobby Dominguez also has bruises on his knuckles. There's bruising on Bobby's body, and then that tracks with the blood splatters 75 feet up the bluff. Like, if the killer, the assailant, tried to light the shack on fire and then bounced before it even lit, by the time he's getting up there or something, if his nose, he might have just got out of there because maybe his nose was bleeding the whole time, and he's like.
But then wouldn't, like, you've had a nosebleed before. Wouldn't we see a trail of blood, like a nosebleed, like this isolated drop of blood? I appreciate is of interest, but it's just, so if he killed them, there's all this fresh blood at the scene at that time. Then he drags them into so I'm not sure how much time goes by there, but it's some time, surely. Most of that blood is going to dry up that he got on them. And it's just odd to me that there's not a consistent trail. So it's weird to me. I mean, the bruised knuckles definitely is compelling for sure for a fight. That's to me what makes it seem as though something happened. But I mean, I would need to know more about the forensics. Like, when did that bruising occur? Did he fight recently? I don't know.
So there's the problem. I brought this up on Morph's show is there's a rumor that Bobby broke up a fight at school. and that's the real problem. Although I don't see like breaking up a fight, right? You don't just jump in between. Hey, stop it, guys! And what do? You start punching them both. Hey, stop fighting! Stop fighting! Isn't that going to escalate it worse, right? So it doesn't really make sense to me that he stopped a fight by fighting more, right? So it seems more like maybe when the knife. I'm going to speculate. Maybe when the knife came out, or the assailant grabbed Linda or grabbed her bathing suit top. Maybe that's when Bobby took the shot. Basically, like Hartnell.
We don't know, right? He could have gotten loose while he was being stabbed, maybe hit a couple of punches, hit a rock, or done something. Like we don't really know.
Yeah. To be clear, he wasn't stabbed.
I'm sorry.
I always speculate a nosebleed, but there's multiple options here, right? He could have punched him in the mouth. It could be blood from maybe did Zodiac bite his tongue? Did he get punched in the lip? Is it a tooth? Sometimes like someone gets punched, their tooth goes through their lip. It could be blood from the mouth. He could have punched his eye and opened up his eye socket, like you see that in MMA.
Yeah. He could have had something over his mouth to cover blood. One drop goes. Sure.
Yeah.
It's one of those frustrating things because it seems like, okay, maybe we have the assailant's blood. But just like in the Riverside case where the press, not the police, say that there was a blood trail from the crime scene to the street, weird thing for them to have potentially made up.
100%.
But we don't have it from police that this occurred, and B, we don't have any sort of testing of this blood. They're not saying it.
It's one article, and the other article, Druzer, does say that rocks were pulled from the creek and sent to Ray Pinker for testing.
I've seen that one.
But is that just the rocks from where Bobby and Linda's hair samples and blood and bullets were from? It doesn't really specify that why would they not take that? If they
found blood, then the killer's bleeding. If they found blood 75 feet, whatever, up the cliff, then the killer's bleeding. So his blood may be mixed in.
And they don't think that is, if they don't think that's Bobby's and Linda's up there, why would they not also pull that one for evidence? It doesn't really make sense.
They may not know for sure, but it seems like Bobby and Linda were shot from a distance.
Yeah, right. And all of this is like we're talking about, if we're talking about in the creek bed and on the beach mouth of the ocean, they call it, or the river, whatever, creek. As Druzer said, all of that is significantly further away than this 75 feet back up the bluff. Now, I like what Zach was saying, because what I personally think is even though it's isolated, and I do tend to think this one's probably Zodiac. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I don't see Zodiac. If it is Zodiac, let's put it like that. I don't see Zodiac doing the crime barefaced. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, it doesn't mean he had a Mikado from the executioner, Coco, the high executioner, Mikado execution uniform on, but, Texarkana Moonlight Murders, Ned, you've covered many times. Now, I've recently shown the Santa Rosa Hooded Terror. Have you seen that, Druzer, from 37? It's that other guy that wore that bag thing over his head. So it's much easier to get one of those potato sacks or a pillowcase like Shock Corridor, which came out in 63, and punch 2 eye holes through it. But maybe a more likely thing is just like a bandana over the, have your eyes open and have some sort of bandana across your face, like what Zach was saying. Then you get punched in your nose and your mouth a couple times. It doesn't totally drip onto your clothing or all over the sand, but maybe it's accumulating on your mouth mask, and you get up to the top when you're done, you take it off, and then the blood pours off. Yeah. Like I kind of just thought of that just right now.
Because I've had that too, where it's like I've fallen skating or something, and when the bandage comes off, there's like tons of, and felt gross.
So maybe it held up to that point. He's trying to burn the shack, but then he realizes like the bandana's filling up, whether he would have kept it on after the crime or not. I don't know if that makes sense after you just murdered the 2 victims. You guys take it from there.
I'm sorry for saying that you got stabbed earlier. I was thinking Riverside for some reason, but yeah, it's the now. I'm really curious about the bruising on the knuckles, and if there were any pictures taken of that, or if there's any evolution in knowledge that we can that there is, right, based on.
They have the morgue cadaver pictures. It's not something I particularly enjoy looking at.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. Obviously, I'm a fucking idiot. I have no idea what you can tell from a picture of the morgue or anything, or what type of information they would have documented.
I asked Voight, I don't know if that was on Discord or on Tapatalk, Druzer, where I asked Voight, like, how do they determine 2-day-old bruises, 3-day-old bruises? Is it just from the look and decomposition of the, I asked Voight, but it's like,
Yeah, and would even bruising occur if they died within 5-10 minutes of impact and things? Does blood pool in the same way? I just don't understand.
A lifeline to Susanna Ryan. I don't know anything about decomposition.
They can tell a lot of stuff, but I don't think it's an exact science. They can certainly tell whether it was whether the person was alive or not when they
maybe days
they were killed.
Maybe how many days? I don't think they could do like 3:14 p.m. on June 4th, 1963. I don't see them being able to zero in that granularly.
Are there any suspects that are, obviously outside of the Seawaters thing and whatever, that can be in any way somewhat tied to Gaviota Beach?
Are you referring to the Net Shits documentary when they said?
Yeah, I don't even want to obviously Seawaters and people are going to have opinions and stuff. But I'm wondering if there are any other suspects out there, even Allen or Cheney or whoever, that have any ties to Gaviota Beach in any way, anything even resembling concrete.
Well, okay, so I should get the press release out and we'll pull it up after I'm done doing this diatribe right here. But, in my episode, Zach, I covered the local suspects who would have been like George Gill. That's the dude that built the shack. He had a .22 rifle. He was a tall, slender dude. He didn't match stockiness or barrel-chested or Welsh minor, if you will. So there was nothing to say like had a Zodiac type of build. He ultimately takes an inconclusive polygraph. They looked at him for a suspect in the swindles. And then he just falls off the map. He's basically cleared. There's another kid, Robert Lee Bell, who knew. I think there's 2 kids from the high school that are interviewed, and one of them said like he had bruises on his fists. He said he was jealous of Bobby because of his girlfriend or whatever, but like it all went nowhere, Zach. Like every single one of these went nowhere. Robert Lee Bell.
Well, and for them to have known him, he has to follow them. He has to know where they're going that day. There's there's so many assumptions that you have to make
But it's high school kids. So the first thing they look at are like, okay, well, high school kids don't have like business associates or things of that nature. Then Robert Lee Bell had scratches on his arms. He said was from a puppy. He stole a .22 revolver and a .22 rifle from a rancher. He also gets cleared. So he
So
stole.
I wonder. Okay, so we're talking about defensive wounds, but we're also talking about them getting shot by a FAR, which is those two are hard for me to reconcile. Now, if they were shot from afar, what makes me think is because, okay, now correct me if I'm wrong, 22 long, whatever ammo it doesn't have that much stopping power?
Yeah, it has the lowest stopping power out of any caliber.
So is it possible he shoots Edwards, shoots Dominguez, and then, there's some sort of playing dead like we know people do, Brian Hartnell getting shot, shock or whatever. He gets up closer to the bodies, and then he starts defending himself or starts to try and make a run for it or grab him in some way.
I like where you're going with it. We have absolutely no idea. So Linda,
or maybe he regains consciousness and at some time while being dragged and there's a scuffle or something. I'm just trying to reconcile being shot from afar.
That would be interesting.
Defensive wound.
So Linda is shot most likely in the back, running away, and then shot in the leg, which shatters her leg.
So that would make me assume that there's some sort of a scuffle between him and Dominguez, and then she has the opportunity to run.
Exactly. So I think that's exactly what happened. I think that whether the assailant was already sighting Linda running away, or whether Bobby told Linda to turn and run, and then he took Bobby was like.
So maybe he shoots Dominguez first. Maybe his plan. Maybe it's sexually motivated. Maybe he plans to rape the girl. He kills the guy. Or do whatever with the girl, kills the guy. He thinks he's dead, goes to approach the girl. Guy regains consciousness. There's this shift in focus. Girl runs away. He shoots her from the back. Scuffle then occurs between him and the guy. Ends up gaining control of this altercation, whatever. Kills him. Realizes nothing is going the way that he wants. He wants to destroy evidence and all that. He wasn't, it all unfolded chaotically. And then whatever, gets the fuck out of there. But that to me points completely away from Zodiac.
I mean, I just don't. I think that a younger Zodiac is going to make those mistakes, though. He doesn't know that he's a cipher master in 1963 and all this.
Right, but to assume that he's going to kill Dominguez first, that means he has to have a reason to keep Edwards around, which I'm going to assume is sexual motivation in the theory that we just discussed. Not saying that this is all reality or anything.
Yep.
But so I'm just making the point that I'm of the belief that Zodiac is not a sexually motivated killer.
We have no idea. Druzer will tell you we have no idea. We have not enough info on MO.
There's no evidence of it, but if he was linked to the Gaviota crime or the Riverside crime, then
it would be different. It would be an absolute different story. Agreed.
Maybe he does that when he's not going to tell the cops what he did.
100%.
Maybe there's some sort of sexual stuntation that occurs, and he doesn't want to anymore for whatever reason.
Maybe there was a reason why he wanted the kids out of the car at Lake Herman Road.
I mean,
100%.
I am aware of one suspect that was vehemently trying to be a criminal, but not be a pedophile. So, rapist, sexual deviant.
Yeah, I think that suspect had much more of an interest in young boys than he did Linda Faye Edwards.
And that's very true as well. Yeah,
I will negate the conversation.
Yeah,
Zach knows how I feel about it.
Totally. And also I'm just not sure how much that whole and obviously it's touchy subject and whatnot, but I'm just not sure how much types come into play when it comes to pedophilia. I don't know.
No, yeah, I can agree with that point. So here's the thing. I discussed this with Morf, right? Everyone says, what do you have at Gaviota? Marlin hitch rope, is that by rope? Trying to light the shack on fire, is that by fire? Having the 22 long rifle on you, is that by gun?
If that's the case, he would have proved it. He would have wanted to show that that's what he was doing, and Zodiac never did that.
Except that the scene was extremely sloppy, like we just said. He totally lost control and then bled all over it. So I don't know if that's the one that he would look to, hey, my master crime was at Gaviota Beach, where a high school kid punched me in the face multiple times while I had a firearm on me. You look like
and he would amateur. He's susceptible to embarrassment. I'll definitely say that. I'll agree with that. So if that is the case, and people were able to say, oh yeah, the Dominguez almost got me. But I mean, at the end of the day, he'd be able. It's a more valiant story. I almost lost, but I took on the kid. I'm the he
doesn't want
have been able to sell it.
Go ahead, Ned.
No, that's just this is very important for profiling because the Zodiac appears to be very power assertive.
Agreed.
And it's not like we know this perfectly, but a big explanation why he would not mention Domingos Edwards is because he lost control of the situation temporarily. And then as Ross just said, he sloppily had to, think quickly and just kind of start shooting and then bring the bodies to the shack. And, even though this isn't the theory that I go with, other people have brought this to my attention that the reason why the bodies are dragged, the reason why he may have tried to burn the shack is because he was trying to cover up his failure. And the failure
100%.
is that he almost lost control. The Zodiac wants to have power over the victims for the entirety of the crime. Even if they're able to run away for a little bit and, punching him in the face, he's going to view that as a failure. It's my goodness, this isn't how I wanted it to go.
No resistance.
But for that to be true, we have to assume that Zodiac had a master plan from 64.
Yeah, 62 to 63. Davis 62, Gaviota 63.
The reason why I buck against that is because he had no reason to believe that the police, or certainly the public, would have known about anything that went wrong at Gaviota Beach.
But he did.
Until the injured blood article comes out.
I mean, maybe him being concerned about evidence because it was a sloppier crime and not wanting to definitively tie it to his persona, I think holds a lot of water. Yeah, that holds a lot of water.
That's all internal. That's just what he's thinking. It's just his perception of it would be a failure. So
where am I wrong here, though? Where am I wrong here, though? At 63, if he's committing this crime and we're making the assumption that he wouldn't want to be perceived as a failure, that means that his perception is in his mind state at this time. So he is. So we're walking around this territory where we're assuming Zodiac is playing with this idea of being the Zodiac as early as 63. He wants to start committing crimes and he wants to start taking credit for it. He just doesn't know how yet.
Wait a second, Zach. Why do you think that? Why do you think that he would why do you think that he would have had the Zodiac persona?
Well, maybe not the Zodiac persona specifically, but he wanted to commit murders and be a serial killer and do that. It seems like you're telling me that his perception, his public perception, his persona, how people think of him, are in his mind state at that time. If he's worried about him being embarrassed about how the crime unfolded.
Absolutely not. It's not about the media at that point. This is purely about how he feels about it.
How he feels about it. I see what you're saying.
He feels
I'm not trying to buck against. I'm just trying to understand.
Right. This is just how he thinks of it. He's a power assertive serial killer. He wants to maintain power at all times. As Ross said, he wants no resistance. The fact that there was resistance. Oh my gosh, that was terrible. That was terrible. I almost lost control of everything.
He doesn't like that. So he scales back to Lake Herman Road, decides to shoot in an easier way. He's not going in these isolated places and not attacking big, strong dudes that can run at them at any moment. He's getting them in seating positions between car doors and stuff.
Exactly.
And he almost ran away at that time too. So
Yep.
So
maybe Ross is right. Okay, maybe I got to do something different. As terrible as it is, but we're trying to get inside the mind of this person here.
I think we'd be remiss not to at least mention that in one of his first letters, well, I think it was the November 9th letter, Zodiac says that he started his collecting of slaves at Lake Herman Road.
Zodiac started his collection of slaves at Lake Herman Road. You know, in my full circle theory, 62, 63, 64, he's not Zodiac yet. He's just a young serial killer trying to develop the Zodiac persona. If you bring in
there's any reason for him to not want to take credit for more crimes unless he was worried about evidence.
100%. And I think there's mistakes at every one of these non-canonical
But he
scenes.
wouldn't have been worried about forensic evidence at that time. It would have been more about connection and places and circumstantial, right? So it's like, to me, does that not connect? If we're going to walk down the path where Zodiac is responsible for the canonical crimes and he didn't take responsibility, and we know he likes to take responsibility for murders, and we know he likes to prove it when he did.
My Riverside activity, there's a hell of a lot more down there.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is hard because he doesn't prove it. He just says it.
But Zach, why do you think the Zodiac wouldn't be worried about forensic evidence in 69?
Well, forensic evidence in the sense of like blood types and like, you know, if he wore gloves and had a hairnet and had hair, like, I mean, what is he worried about outside of eyewitness descriptions?
Fingerprints, blood typing, and exactly. If he knew any of the victims.
So if he bled, then he's concerned about his blood being attached to anything, about any type of forensic evidence. So again, to
DNA.
Me, he wouldn't be aware of DNA at the time, but I imagine that he would be aware of future technologies and things being able to connect him possibly.
So it sounds like to me that he is very much aware of forensics, and he's very much aware of things like fingering. The Zodiac talked about how he's aware of all this stuff. I put 2 coats of airplane cement on my fingertips so I don't leave fingerprints behind.
Absolutely.
He's thinking about the forensics.
Even if he didn't do those things, he puts enough reasonable doubt to say that he did in there.
He said
he
was
intelligent in that way. Yeah.
No,
whether
but
he actually
I mean, I really think the Zodiac actually was very much aware of forensics and how forensics could link him to the crimes. And I mean, I think what you meant to say is that DNA evidence didn't exist at the time, or DNA technologies didn't exist. So he wouldn't necessarily care too much about leaving like blood evidence or saliva evidence or something like that. But in terms of, there are all types of forensic pieces of evidence that could link the Zodiac to crimes. I mean, and I think he knew that. I think the Zodiac, once again, was very aware of crime scenes, aware of police procedures. I don't know if we have enough to say that he was a cop, but definitely somebody who was familiar with how they operated.
Mm-hmm. Well, you would get that from detective magazines, right? You would get that from pop culture. You wouldn't know he was a police officer. So, sorry, and just to be clear, what I am saying is that I think that he would be aware of, yes, he's aware of forensic evidence, but I think that for him not to prove that he did it, in which case you talk about it in some way, talk about the ammunition, say something that proves it. He knows the difference between proving and not proving, and I think that's clear. So anytime he doesn't prove it, and that's where the Simon Says comparison comes into me. I don't really like to take anything into consideration that he doesn't prove was him, and if there's enough evidence to point towards the fact that he did commit something and he doesn't prove it, that would mean that he is insecure about the type of evidence left behind at that particular crime. Does that make sense?
I absolutely agree with you, Zach, because it's like ultimately that is the theory that I go with. I'm just exploring a different possibility right now. And
I just want to make sure
I'm exploring is just more that the Zodiac was horribly inconsistent. Some people think that he did that intentionally to confuse people. And also, think about what Ross said. The Zodiac may have chosen to only attribute the persona to those specific crimes in 68 and 69. Now, why did he do that? Maybe he was dealing with some type of mild psychotic disorder and he had his own twisted, mangled reason for that. Maybe he did it because he wasn't just going to give everybody the blueprint for everything away, because then that would be more likely to get caught. So, I mean, there's so many reasons why somebody would not do that.
100%. So the other problem is, right, so he stands over Bobby and Linda, and after has him down, peppered with shots and has him down, was it 11 into Bobby and 9 into Linda, and then reloads after they're already down and shoots him again. That kind of bespeaks to him getting injured in the fight with Bobby and being so angry that he's over-aggressing, over-killing the bodies, and then who knows what's going on with dragging him back to the shack. Now, the question we have, Druzer, is everyone says that it's a knife or a blade that cuts her top. I just wonder if that's verified by the straight cut People make that similar argument to how he was cutting Paul Stein's shirt. Or could that rip just come about just from the assailant just ripping it with his hand, or her running away when he, and getting it ripped like that? Because we have no idea what's going on. We don't know if that rip occurred before Linda's dropped or after she's dragged to the shack when she's already expired.
Yeah, I feel like when we talk about that slit in his shirt, I picture the slit in Hulk Hogan's shirt before he rips it off, right? This little tiny whatever thing to be able to grab and tear the fabric. But I want to know more about this tear, because if it's maybe he tried to grab her and drag her with that and it ripped. Why wouldn't he?
It was a one-piece bathing suit.
Yeah, bathing suit.
So it may have just been the straps that were cut.
Yeah,
but without having seeing a document examination,
just seems like a lot of
seeing a photo of it. We can't really know.
Yeah. So all right, let's do it. We know Zach is a big Alan fan. Let's pull up this press release and see what the heck is going on with it, because there's some interesting, strange wording in this, and you guys have all seen it before, but just for the audience, we'll revisit it again. Can I share this? Can I share this, Jerome?
Yes, you can.
Check out my Zodiac buddies.
Let's get it going. Hi, Zach's wife.
Hello.
We're the Zodiac nerds.
Yeah, she's my Zodiac homies. Yeah.
All right, here
She's heard all
things. We'll go entire screen, and then boom. You guys see this?
Yeah.
I can't read it, but I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little blurry. I'll try to make it bigger. So, it seems like they're looking into Alan, or at least they make these they make these statements that we think it's strong due to him being in the area, and what that bespeaks to is Alan at Atascadero. I believe this is huh?
Is that what they mean by Alan being in the area at Atascadero?
It has to be. I mean, there's basically no. Otherwise, it's some suspect that we've never had any idea of that would be in, I guess, around Santa Barbara, which is nothing any of us have ever heard of. But when he says several significant similarities between our case and the others, meaning the canonicals, as well as other evidence, which I'm not at liberty to disclose at this time, all tend to connect Zodiac with this crime. In addition, we have information to be investigated further, which may place him in Santa Barbara in 63, the Santa Barbara area.
So there is something that says that he was in the Santa Barbara area in 63.
Well, if you consider Atascadero Santa Barbara area, which is 80 miles north.
See, and that's the thing. It's one of those things that I just don't know. It seems like such a colloquial piece of evidence. It depends on who's talking about it and how they like to describe their living area. A lot of people like to say they live in Vancouver because they live in fucking Surrey and it's an hour and a half away. You know what I'm saying? So I just don't know.
Right. I mean, so there's some interesting things. I would like to emphasize that we are not using the notoriety of Zodiac to dispose of a difficult case, nor are we closing our minds to the possibility that he may not be responsible. It kind of leaves the door open both ways there. It just...
Well, they're definitely not working off of nothing, right? It's clearly of interest. So,
This is after they coordinate with Armstrong and Toschi and everybody with a back and forth ballistics comparison. But here's the problem. We never hear about this ever again. I don't know if you know when this dropped. I have the date somewhere, Druzer. I think it's
I'm just going to ask you.
72 or 73. I'll pull it up.
If it's 72 or 73, then Alan's already been searched and is very much on their radar.
That's my whole thing. Let me stop this share. So it just cools off, like Druzer just said right there, and falls off a cliff, and we never hear about it ever again from this press release. Baker talks a little bit more when he becomes the cold case detective from 72 to, I think, was it 91, 92, Druzer? But he never references this again. You know what I mean? This whole Alan or him or whatever this was, this never comes up ever again. Webster doesn't address this ever again. No one does. So
I don't know.
They had pre-cut lengths of rope and they had size 10.5 boot prints. I think that's what they had, and that was a pretty good connection.
That's what I think too, but they just never embellish on it. They don't do it. Like you said, when Alan's raided and cleared, they don't say, okay, well, him who was in the Santa Barbara area is no longer being considered. Now we're back to local suspects. You know what I mean?
One of the reasons why I think that probably none of these early crimes were Zodiac is because I think that they were all committed by local offenders. So maybe magically someone who lived in Riverside, lived in Oceanside, lived in Santa Barbara, all these things together, and then moved to the Bay Area. I think unless you have a suspect like that it's probably not relevant. Like Alan only took one day off work in his whole life, and it was the Monday.
1st.
It was the Monday after Sherry Joe Bates was killed in Riverside. And that's fine. That puts him in the area. Shel Cavalli was also probably in the area.
Yep, absolutely.
But neither of them live there.
Yeah,
So
but the fact is that Riverside was so highly publicized and also romanticized. It's difficult to put that one in a local lens.
But I mean, it's someone who generally knows the college. Like, I don't know that a guy just like randomly is driving through town and walks up to RCC and tries to drag a random girl out. So it's California. I live here.
I meant that in the sense
possible.
of trying to identify a suspect rather than
all of these theories are built on House of Cards.
Yeah.
If the killer of Sherry Joe Bates was not the author of the letters, then there's no connection whatsoever.
Right.
I personally think there's a lot of connection between Riverside and Z in the way of inspiration. It's hard to discount the letters. It's just hard to do it in the way of evidence.
It's the exact signature that Zodiac showed, and it's pretty damn unique.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, Ned. You sort of have to go back 20 years before you see someone exhibiting similar murderous writing to the press.
Yeah, like it's not one of those things that we're putting into a funnel. Like, it's very rare type of psychopathy.
Yeah, but the fingerprints didn't match. The heel print at Riverside was somewhere between size 8 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
So not entirely conducive.
Wristwatch is way smaller. Seems like a way smaller guy than Zodiac, possibly.
Also smaller than the Domingos Edwards killer then too. Because I mean, I tend to think that the Domingos Edwards killer was probably pretty big to get in that confrontation with Robert Domingos, who was a football player, and not get completely.
I mean, doesn't a gun even all those odds?
Not if it's too long at close range, though. Like, if someone approaches you within 1 to 2 feet and you have to swing, like, you're better off swinging the rifle at him than. But
we have to assume that he's coming at them with an advantage. So it's like, he's going to make himself known and put them in a what's the word I'm looking for? In a they're going to be in a compliant form with the gun from a longer range, right? They're not going to come up right behind him. It's not a public place.
But at what point, right? Let's break it down from Berryessa. Cecilia ties Brian, but then Zodiac gets behind him and tightens it. So does he have the rifle at Gaviota on a strap around his shoulder? So when he's attempting to tie them or has the rope out or whatever, maybe it's just hanging on the, a lot of people, have this rifle strap. When you're using your hands, you put the rifle to your back and you're hunting and you're preparing something, then you could swing it back up. So if it's just kind of hanging there.
I'm not sure what to think about the the 22, the rifle versus the handgun, because him having a rifle better explains, like you're saying, a confrontation. He has more opportunity to get into an altercation or to get into a physical altercation with him. But it just seems, for someone that we know Zodiac to not be using a hand pistol, that he has another hand to do. It just seems odd.
Right.
I think he was probably using a rifle at Gaviota because of the sniper reports 2 days earlier.
And we like this. So is the assumption, if we're backtracking, the assumption is 2 days earlier he's doing his sniper stuff, and he makes the realization, Ned, like you said, internally he's going like, this isn't giving me the rush that I want. This isn't like, so then he decides to go down. He notices that it's a secluded area. He might be able to get away with this, and he's watching the area then for the next few days. Finally comes across Domingo and Edwards, and it's a crime of opportunity then. And within himself, he's like, oh, this feels much better. But then he realizes that the attention that he's getting through media is actually what's filling his balloon, as opposed to the killing itself. It's odd that the killing de-escalates, right? And I'm of the theory that the letters are the actual means to an end, or are the actual ends, while the murders being a means. So him having this big murderous rampage beforehand goes against that, it's difficult for me to live in that world.
It's
Well,
hard. You go.
Who was killed by the Gaviota sniper?
Nobody
No
was
one.
killed.
No one was
he
killed,
missed.
but they were being
Oh,
sniped
they were
at.
shot
There was
at.
all those, and there was a few more. It wasn't just the one. I thought there was a few reportings.
There was
of it.
2 incidents. There was 3 girls were shot at in one instance. I forget how many in the other. But
11 surfers.
A murderous
Yeah,
rampage, murders Domingos and Edwards. That's a double homicide. And I know what you're saying, Zach. You're saying like that crime looks a little bit more extreme, more intense, more hands-on and everything. But once again, if the Zodiac wants to maintain this presence of control and power, then at Lake Berryessa, that would be an escalation because more elaborate hooded costume, complete control, knew how to handle everything. And also, Ross will maybe verify this, the detail that everybody zones in on, double-checking Brian Hartnell's restraints, because maybe that was not done at Gaviota.
Exactly.
And, I mean,
No, you're absolutely right. I can't ignore those similarities. I really can't.
I mean, I agree with where you're going with it, Zach, but your speculation that it's not giving me the high that I want from sniping at the random people. How about it is giving me the high that I want? I liked that next time what Ned said. I want to catch somebody closer up. I want to actually shoot them so I can see what happens. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like the other way, psyching yourself up. You shot at random people twice now. And then the next one, you're going to actually try to hit them, you know?
So that assumes that he's still in this state of figuring things out and finding his niche MO and whatever all the way through the crime. So to me, that shows that it points further away from him being a mastermind and it more unfolding in a chaotic fashion, which makes it harder and harder to believe some of these other theories with guys, because a lot of these suspects rest on the idea that they had this giant plan and they were these criminal masterminds.
I think it more starts with, I'll let you go right after this, Druzer, is what you were saying before, which is like you have a loose idea. I want a boyfriend and girlfriend, high school kids on a beach. I want a couple college, it starts very, clearly Lake Berryessa is more planned out, right? Obviously, from what Ned said, creating a costume and all this other crazy Zodiac BS that no one else would do. But as far as the other ones, I think it starts out like as a very loose plan. And then depending on everything that you said before, the impulsive activity and what is the result of it, that's why exactly what Druzer said before, you see alterations from Lake Herman Road to Blue Rock Springs, the 9mm. You know what I mean? Yeah. What were you saying, Druz?
Well, I think whether he did any of the earlier crimes or earlier crimes that we haven't discovered or not, I think he liked to kill. I take him at his word at that. Exactly. He waited half a year after Lake Herman Road before he said anything. Mm-hmm. And
it seemingly satisfied the urge for the time being.
Well, I don't think it's that complicated. I think he liked to kill people. He liked to be in control of situations. And then when he started getting press, he liked that and he wanted more of it. And so in each successive crime, he gave reporters something else to write about. They didn't have much to go on after Lake Herman Road. So he introduced a phone call in Blue Rock Springs. And, he made sure that it was in the same general area, same general victim type, so that they would see the connection. And what did the police do? They went on strike. In other words, like drop the case from his perspective.
Freeze it, yeah.
Yeah, and then 2 weeks later, we have the letters and the ciphers, and this whole campaign starts to take form.
And by the way, I'm just going to jump in right now saying that I'm going to have to get off the stream now, but thank you, Jerome, for having me. And you guys know me. I'm Ned Dehan from Black Box Online Radio. I do a segment about the Zodiac Killer every Monday. And I also want to be clear that when I said I was exploring a possibility, I mean, mostly what I genuinely think about the Gaviota shooting is really in line with what Zach said. It's just maybe some of the challenges about why it happened, or why certain things might be impossible or something, or just why the evidence could be interpreted in a different way, was something that, I was just questioning. But yes, I mostly think that there is perhaps an 80% chance that the Gaviota shooting was the Zodiac. Out of all the non-canonicals, that's the highest rated one. And it's entirely possible, though, that it's just a completely unrelated attack because someone just saw two people in a vulnerable place who had homicidal tendencies. He acted on it, and it's a completely different killer. And Fire Pixie, thank you so much for sharing Black Box Online Radio. And I'll be seeing you guys very soon for a new episode about the Zodiac. Druzer, Zach, and Ross. I'll see Jerome. See you next time. Okay.
Peace, Ned.
Ned.
See you
care.
soon. Take care, my friend.
Have a
Take
good
care.
night, brother.
If the Gaviota murder does turn out to be Zodiac, then there's other crimes in the area in the same general time period of Zodiac that we would have to consider.
100%. 100%. I mean, of course, Druzer's brought up Hood Garcia before. I mean, there's quite a few more. I brought him up Torrey Pines here in San Diego. We have several. If you go find every couple on the beach in California, it's probably way more than what you guys think. Or maybe if you follow true crime closely, you have a good idea of how it is. I agree with most of what Ned said in his outro. The only problem is, like, if we have 10 and a half military boots and they turned out to be wing walkers, I would find that pretty unlikely that just two guys happen to wear wing walkers to these two kind of, waterside, and again, it's super possible. Like, there's hundreds of thousands of wing walkers. So, I mean, it wouldn't, but it just, for the water sacrifice and all the Zodiac MO, it would be unusual, I think, for things to line up that nicely. And that's obviously why when Santa Barbara Sheriff Department talked to SFPD, that's why this came up as such a thing. I also like what Druzer said about maybe Ray Davis being a local assailant, Santa Barbara being a local assailant, Swindles being a local assailant. I'm going to leave out Riverside, as I said. What I would also think could be probable, and it seemed like law enforcement was maybe going in this direction at times, maybe one killer for the Swindles, Dominguez Edwards, maybe even Ray Davis. And then I guess that just has nothing to do with the Zodiac canonical crimes. It's just some guy who had a fairly similar MO around San Diego, Oceanside, and Santa Barbara,
Yeah, it's hard to know what to say.
Yeah, tough to speculate on that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For me, they seem like locals in the crimes where the assailant takes further action to get notoriety locally. What would be in it for someone who didn't live in Riverside to get Riverside press?
100%. 100%. Yeah. And obviously, Swindles got San Diego press, Santa Barbara, Gaviota, Lompoc obviously had a lot of stuff on them at the time. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting. I'd love for something to break, like me and Morf were saying. You guys saw how my FOIA worked out. I'm going to try to reach out for another statement to SB sheriffs and just see if I can get anything on Dominguez Edwards, because until they open up the files, I don't see how we're going to make progress.
I think
unless they're sending out a bunch of evidence.
I think they fired the department that gives grants FOIA requests.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
It's
an open case, so California state law, right? They don't need to do anything for me. I'm a nerd on the internet, so who the hell is this guy?
Yeah,
that was my question to you, Ross, because I live in Belgium and not in America and not in California. Do you think it's possible to have access to, let's say, all the cold case who occurred between 62 and 68 in the area of Riverside?
It's jurisdictional and departmental. And under California state law, anything that's cold is let's say it's, leave 62 and 63 out, Jerome. Let's say it's 1919 or 1920. Yeah. If it's a cold case, it's technically an open investigation. It could be 100 years ago, and it's an open investigation, so we can't tell you anything. I mean, it's the most frustrating. I understand it to a degree, but me and Morf were just saying this on Zodiac speaking. Like, there might be some witnesses that know something. Maybe somebody saw a car on June 4th, 1963, next to Bobby's car, and knows what kind of model and make and model it is.
Exactly. And I was just thinking maybe it's less about the forensic evidence and maybe it's about like, I talked to a person that day or this, and he's worried about some sort of connection being made there and gas station, whatever it might be. Like, I mean, if it is a crime of opportunity and he wasn't using it as a hunting ground and he wasn't keeping that in mind in his hours leading up to the crime, getting gas, grabbing food, whatever the case might be, then he may have jumped on a situation, thought about it afterwards and said, oh, fuck. I can't conclusively tie that to me, but it also serves my narrative to have people speculate.
What if someone told you, I saw a guy, let's leave like the Vandenberg PX where the ammo may have came from, but like, let's just talk about that Santa Barbara ammunition store. somebody said, like, I saw a guy outside on the payphone, or I saw a guy getting in his car, loading in his ammo boxes, wearing like it would be unusual because it's 63 to 69, 6 years earlier. I saw a dude in a dark blue windbreaker wearing pleated plants with engineering looking shoes who wore horned rimmed glasses with a crew cut, whose face kind of looked like the Composite sketch. If you had that around Vandenberg or Santa Barbara, like, I think it'd be strong enough to be like, okay, well, a guy who looked like the Composite sketch was in the area, or if a witness could verify it, that'd be something.
That's also the exact type of thing they would want to hold back, so that somebody couldn't just nebulously connect the crimes either, right? Yeah. Like if they're
right. That's the problem with the holdbacks. They told you undisclosed evidence. So like Druzer was said, if that's a massive pile of
imagine he wrote on the door.
Yeah. Well, that's the frustrating thing is we can all respect why they require holdback evidence even after the killer is dead. So that if they do get further information, they can make some confirmation. But the frustrating thing is how much they did leak through the press. There's so many things they could have held back in all of these cases, and it made no sense for them. But especially in Riverside.
It seems to me like the bus bomb letter and these bomb threats and whatnot were were related to exactly that. He was aware that there might be holdback, and the police wouldn't do that, and then the police would then be deemed as irresponsible for not letting the public know for these types of threats to be coming in, right, from a person that we know carries out these threats. So I feel like that was purposeful on his part.
Yeah.
Well, he was certainly aware of what was in the press and what wasn't, and.
But I'd say he had an awareness of like what would reflect negatively upon newspapers or SFPD for not releasing.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, I mean that's a bit into the weeds.
Because at that point they weren't releasing full letters yet, right? In ciphers, they had released the one, and I think by the time that occurred, that a lot of his letters were being held back, right? And only pieces of information and snippets were being shown. That's why in the bus bomb letter, he's very specific about the portions of the letter that he must print in the paper. He seems to be cognizant of the idea that they're not going to print 6 pages, but this is the one I want, right? So
they had already censored him. Yes,
they had already censored him. So it just seems like he's going, okay, you're censoring me, I'm going to make it so, and instead of being upset that you're censoring me, I'm going to make it reflect negatively on you for censoring me. And in my opinion, not to bring in a Graysmithism, but is a very smart chess move.
Yeah, I mean, they called him a liar on things that he probably wasn't lying about, and it really seemed to change the tone of the rest of his campaign.
Yeah, exactly.
He wasn't doing all these awful things about the police in the first letters.
So here's my whole thing, right? So they have Alan's DNA because he submitted to every test, or they supposedly have his brain or whatever. So if they kept that rock of the supposed blood splatter of the assailant from Gaviota, and they did that press release insinuating they thought they were going to nail Alan for the Zodiac crimes and throw Gaviota Beach on top of it for a cherry on top. And like Druzer said, his trailers, blah blah blah, all this stuff is rated, and he's essentially cleared at this point. From 63 to now, they wouldn't have tested whatever they have at the Gaviota Beach crime scene versus Alan's DNA to see if that's a match. You know what I mean? And again, it might be totally, a moot point.
You really sort of need an expert. I'm not sure if anyone here knows what evidence can be tested against each other. Not all DNA can be
true.
Yeah. The more I learn about it, the more I realize that it's not as rock solid of a science as it gets made out to be. And honestly, same with fingerprinting, which is a lot more. There's a lot more up to. Fingerprinting has a lot of scrutiny too. It's weird.
Yeah, you need like 15 points of information, and in a lot of the best evidence that we have in the Zodiac case, we don't have anywhere near 15 points.
Yeah.
That reminded me of something, but I think it has slipped my mind. But one thing I wanted to bring up to Zach was the Sandy story. This dirty blonde-haired kid. They stabbed this minor 30 40 miles north of where Dominguez and Edwards die. It's these two kids named J.C. Reed and Coleman, and they have
the confusion comes between this Sandy and Sandy Betts.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so they say that this kid's with them, right? When they stab this coal miner in the back in the heart, and the dude dies. And what people like this, Sandy apparently got a .22 rifle and was trying to obtain .22 ammo. So what the internet loves to do is like, Sandy stabbed Vern Smith, so he's definitely the killer of Dominguez Edwards.
Which is also, like we established, the cheapest, easiest to access ammo that's on the market at that time.
The problem lies with what Druzer said, which is the sniper is already down there on June 2nd. So June 2nd, June 3rd, if Sandy didn't have a car, he would have to be traveling in the Sunbeam with Coleman and Reed that they stole in order to get back from the shack where the sniper is shooting at those surfers, then go up there and kill Vern Charles Smith with the knife, and then make it back down the next day to kill Bobby. And no point ever to Coleman and Reed say, oh, by the way, Sandy got a gun. We drove him back and forth to the beach where he was hiding in a shack to kill people. And first of all, why would they do that anyway if they were the ones in control of the Sunbeam? These are the two guys who literally said they took the knife away from Sandy because they didn't trust him sitting behind them in the car with the knife on him after he stabbed Vern Smith in the back. So do you think they're going to be the commuters for this kid to kill people randomly on the beach and drive up and down Santa Barbara? The whole thing makes no sense.
Yeah, I can't really see why this is even being brought up in the in the conversation. Not that you're bringing it up, but like, in the lore of Zodiac. I'm just covering it. I'm not seeing a connection here between the Sandy character and these kids and the stabbing and then shooting these people and like, so what? So like, if there was an altercation between this child and Domingos, like,
he would have broke his head in 1,000 pieces.
Yeah, he would have fucking body slammed him. Dude.
Yeah,
like,
dude.
So it's just hard.
Yeah, he was described as being like 5'6", 5'7". I don't know if we have I have the graphic with his stats, but he's like barely 150. You know what I mean? That doesn't, nothing. I mean, people.
It's fine if he has a gun and he's going to control a bigger person, but if there is evidence of a struggle, it's just, it's hard, man.
It's out the window. I was going to say that I'm sure you've seen the stuff, Druzer, about like how the description of Sandy was. Now I understand why law enforcement was investigating it, because we have this murder the night before where this random kid stabbed some old guy to death to rob him. So maybe they thought there could be a robbery component to Domingos Edwards. But the thing is Linda's purse was in the floor of Bobby's car. You could literally see that by walking up to Bobby's car and looking through the window. So if you did, like, let's say Zodiac parks behind Hartnell's Carmen Gia, if he did park next to or behind Bobby's car and then looked in there, he would have already saw the purse anyway, right? And so then you're going to go down to the beach and kill these random people when they're in their bathing suits. You pretty much know they don't have their money on them. You know what I mean? So in terms of Coleman, Reed, and Sandy on a crime spree of robbing people, which is what they were doing when they killed Vern Smith. You know what I mean?
The Sandy kid, if he is real and doing all these things and whatever, it just doesn't. It doesn't. The motivation doesn't line up.
Yeah, he's real, but it's like, I don't know. I just don't know if I believe those. But like Morf said, they never come right out and say, "Oh yeah, no."
They ran quite a distance.
Yeah. Yeah, Coleman and Reed never come out and say, "Oh, by the way, we did the second, the charge for second degree murder and conspiracy for robbery, but we lied about the whole Sandy thing. It was us the whole time." I mean, that never happened, like Morf pointed out. So you'd think after their whole lives, they would just change the narrative on that once they got out of jail. Man,
it's always so interesting to see the actual bird's eye view of this space. To say, like, so the attempted escape route, like, so they were killed. Like, how far is that from where they first interacted to where the bodies were dragged from?
It's pretty far. I'd say the whole space is like, 40, 50 square feet, but I can't tell you how it's changed from when I was there a couple of years ago to, were you going to say something earlier, Drews?
Well, I think Sandy is discussed because we know so little about the crime.
Yeah, sure.
And
so
in relation to Zodiac, he's a light-haired, medium height guy with glasses. He was obviously a psycho. who's killing people
but
for
also
no
and
reason.
also somebody that shows that they're just going to kill somebody on a whim with witnesses and stuff, right? It's really hard to.
Yeah, this was not Murder Central, and you know, I think they should definitely look into him and Coleman and Reed.
Sure,
But,
sure.
But I don't know what you guys think, but I think this was. I've gone back and forth in this, but I think this was committed by a single assailant.
I've got a question.
Because I'll be done in a second. Because the bodies were dragged and not carried. I think if there's two guys there, they carry the bodies. It would be more efficient. But they were dragged, so it was probably one guy, and that guy was probably a lot stronger than this Sandy kid.
1 second, Jerome. I think you're right, Druzer. I think that if they have the Wingwalker footprints coming out of Lake Berryessa, they said that they have the Gaviota footprints. It would be quite obvious if it was more than one footprint, right? So
one
ahead,
set of footprints. Yeah.
Jerome, brother.
Yeah. I would like to know if in California or in America, Sandy is a nickname or is a current name.
Could be a nickname.
It seems like beachy kind of
Could be
people.
both.
It's a nickname. So written in the coat of his fatigue jacket that he said he bought or stole from Army Navy, it had the name Robert Kaufman. And then he supposedly left that jacket in some girl's car that he was hiding in when they were hanging out at a dump. Then when he checks into the Arroyo Grande Motel, he uses William Carr. So he's telling everybody to call him Sandy, but then he is smart enough to give these fake names, given that he's 16, 17 years old. Definitely, clearly a seemingly psychopath, as Druzer said. Let me get up this pic of his stats, and we can find out a little bit more about suspect Sandy, the weirdo. Am I sharing?
Yep.
Or do we? Okay, so nickname Sandy, as Jerome was just asking. I mean, the black frame glasses. I mean, is this is that the early predecessor to Zodiac's horn rims? A button-down collared shirt. I mean, they have pretty good detail as to what he's wearing, which is interesting. 17 to 18, 5'3",
5'8".
So is that 5'8" or 5'3"?
5'8".
Okay.
5'8".
150. They have his pant size. Like, where did that come from, Druzer? Did someone measure him, or is that an estimation? Hold on, dude. I need to measure your pant legs. He smokes cigarettes, Pall Malls, and he holds them at the base close to the fingertips. This is by Lieutenant H.C. Clark on maybe June 11th, 63.
To address Jerome's question, though, this is a young guy who no one trusts, and he's using fake names, and he has sandy blonde hair, and they call him Sandy.
Yeah.
So I think Sandy was likely a nickname.
I think so too. To further complicate the issue, the Santa Ana detectives interview and clear a kid matching the Sandy description. He's already in juvie, So I know you've seen those articles, Druzer, I assume. So
but they can't be sure that it was him. I mean, you saw what they have for the description, unless they have an eyewitness like the I forget their names. The two kids said he was
Coleman and Reed. So
unless Coleman and Reed identified the guy that they cleared.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying to Jerome's thing. How many sandy colored hair surfer kids are 15 through 19, we'll say, from Santa Cruz to Santa Barbara. I'd assume a couple thousands in the early 60s that are hanging out at the Santa Cruz boardwalk. Probably a million of them using the nickname Sandy. I think there's the one article where he was I think it was the Santa Cruz boardwalk or one of those areas where the lady saw him walking around with a .22 rifle over his back or whatever and called it in saying he matched the description. So the whole thing is a mess. And then, as Druzer said, there's a million Sandy clones on top of it. So, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just so frustrating. And then they cleared this kid. But I would like to know what cleared him. Did he just say, hey, I'm not the kid that was on that crime spree? I wasn't with Reed and Coleman, or like Druzer said, did those kids identify him, or like Morf said, did he have identification on him? he was obviously already in juvie for some crime, so maybe that was the alibi. It was just that whatever crime he was in juvie for, he was in there on the date of the on June 3rd and June 4th. So that just takes him totally out for. But again, this is just one Sandy. That's the point I always put forward. So however many of these Sandys there were that were either interviewed or identified, it really makes it crazy. But I don't think he's down there for Bobby and Linda.
He didn't have a car, so he wasn't the guy.
Right. And what I was going to come to before is, I feel like
that's the best point right there, man.
Go ahead, Jerome.
Right there.
Yeah. Well, yes, I agree with you, Druzer. If we assume there is just one killer.
Yeah, it takes out the three of them because the three of them are together at the Vern Smith murder. So why aren't all three together? They drop Sandy off, but the kids who are driving the Sunbeam seems like Coleman and Reed, and he's just tagging along. So that means they now have to commute him to the location, which just what the internet likes to do is they read an article on Gaviota, and then they read an article of Vern Smith, and they find out that Vern is in Lompoc, but that's still almost 35 miles north in this very tight mountain pass road that really is quite far from the beach. Like, I think if you look at it on the internet, you're going to think in your mind, Lompoc, Gaviota State Park, and they're super close together. You can just walk down there. You know what I mean? And like, you could just easily get down there, which is not the case. It's still a good commute. That's my whole point with this. There's a good amount of distance between those two crimes. If it was the two towns next, if it was like Solano County and Benicia, the way that Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs are right next to each other, I would say, sure, go for it. It's within walking distance. It's 1.2 miles. Do whatever. But once it starts getting 20, 30, 40 miles, like Druzer said, and the kid is never reported to have his own transportation and not even that much money, except for the 360 Coleman and Reed steal from Smith. They split between each other and they give Sandy 20 before they drop him off at the hotel. So he doesn't even have the money to get taxis down there,
And we know
just
Sandy
so much, man. That information that you just gave, it's just like, whoa, God.
Right. Yeah. Right. I just don't like the jump of Sandy is Zodiac or Sandy is Dominguez Edwards. It doesn't make sense. Once you look at a map, you're like, no. It
makes good fiction, but we know that Sandy was not there on June 2nd when the snipe attacks were happening. It's not concrete information, but given what we do have, we got to build on something. And I say that whoever this guy was, he was there days ago.
According to Sandy and Coleman and Reed, they don't even have ammunition for the firearm. They're still trying to buy it at the hotel when Coleman and Reed get reported. It's because the hotel worker hears them trying to order ammo over the phone from an ammo store. So going off by what Druzer just said here, you're talking about an assailant who's already in the George Gill shack, already has the TL-21 ammo, whether it's from the SB store or from Vandenberg, and they're already down there shooting at surfers and girls sunbathing, whereas Sandy's way up there with the knife by the third, and none of them three have obtained 22 ammunition at this time from their own timeline. None of that makes any sense,
Yeah, you'd be remiss for not doing the Reed Coleman portion of the story, but I don't think it has anything to do with the crime.
Right, it's a crime spree that starts on the Santa Cruz boardwalk and goes from there to Lompoc, and I mean it is kind of interesting. They throw the knife and all that stuff out of the car, and the police still found it. So I'd like to know. And the Sunbeam, I brought this up on Zodiac speaking. I don't know if they just found the guy who owned it and just gave it back to him, like after these three murderers fingerprinted all over your car. Did they properly go over the Sunbeam and get Sandy's prints? I mean. Doesn't really help if it's not in AFIS or whatever. And of course, Sandy's never seen again. He's tried as a unapprehended John Doe in the court documents. But Sandy is the Zodiac. He's like way too small. In 63, he's only 150, so he has to put on significant weight. And then Brian doesn't see Sandy blonde hair poking out of the hood.
No, he saw strands of fabric from the hood.
There you go. I like that. That's cool. I wanted to mention this when Druzer mentioned the sniper. August 11th, 69, the sniper at Lake Berryessa, Druzer. I always wonder if those snipers are Zodiac. What you were saying, Zach, before, Zodiac not Zodiac, the Gaviota Beach Killer being a sniper, hyping himself up for Dominguez Edwards, and then the sniper reported at Lake Berryessa. I don't know if that's just random synchronicity of snipers falling around Zodiac at crimes, but it's interesting, you know.
It is.
I think those kinds of guys flock to those kinds of areas.
True.
But I will say that it does ring kind of true that Zodiac may have started as a distance sniper before he, went into full Zodiac gear.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I kind of get that feel from the swindles, even though it's not necessarily like a far location,
Yeah.
but it's just a tough in an area. I'm down here on the Mexico border. We have so many criminals. There's like, especially in San Diego specifically, there's a massive amount of bases. I mean, it's interesting. Johnny Ray Swindle is a radio man for the Navy. A lot of people like the Navy radar and Navy connections. So there's that, and then obviously Sherry's family being involved. I'm not going to go down the whole horn. Everybody is a military industry complex, and they all know each other thing. But it is what it is. But I think that's.
I don't really think there's much evidence to point towards Zodiac being in the military, really.
I agree with that. And again, the wing walkers are not. People say, well, what about wing walkers? They're not military exclusive.
I think he was a wannabe military guy, if anything.
The best evidence
I
that
agree.
Zodiac was in the military is that at least half of the guys his age were.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's just the time period.
Yeah.
That's just the time period. That has little less to do with Zodiac and more to do with cultural norms at the time period.
His ego, though, and the way he's giving geographical coordinates, and he seems to fancy himself that way. I think he was trying to present himself
I agree.
as a capable guy.
That's what Zach said. There's a lot of pseudo military fanboys that wish they were that type of dude.
They are.
I'm more into like if you said he was a federal contractor, or I like the fact that that Morf suspect is that prison guard because instead of saying wing walkers are exclusively Navy and Air Force, which is incorrect, you're better off saying like some type of federal contractor, because that's really what wing walkers were. It was prison workers, maybe other types of federal.
But they were also just like available in a retail stores.
Secondhand at an Army Navy. You know what I mean?
No, sorry. I read in the Lake Berryessa report, it said that there were many stores, not all of which were federal ones, some of which were just open retail stores that carried wing walkers.
So the public,
correct me if I'm wrong, but like they're publicly available.
I mean, I'm open to it, and even like we said, let's say it's not. Almost all that stuff ends up at Army Navy, whether new or used. You know what I mean? So like, it could be a used pair from Army and Navy. They're obviously worn from the footprints we saw at Berryessa.
Especially for somebody who's using Super X22 ammo, right? Like, I mean, they're using the cheapest things. I mean, the important thing to keep in mind, I think, and it's like a sales rule, is, rich people can dress down, but poor people can't necessarily dress up.
100%.
Right?
100%.
So
I agree with that.
It's important to keep that in mind in terms of like the types of resources that this person might have. And like, I mean, I'm just not of the belief that Zodiac was a successful person in his everyday life. I think he was a wannabe and probably felt a lot of those like, insecurities. I mean, I always say that he was the first incel.
Yeah, I can agree with most of that. I think that's going to do. Go, Drum.
I would like to have your take on that. Do you think Zodiac could be Vietnam veteran?
I think we've all been through this before. I'm not very. I mean, sure, he could be. I'm not very high on it though.
Sorry, could be what?
Vietnam veteran.
Yeah, I think Korea might align with his age a
Could
little
fit better. Yeah, Korean War veteran.
So is this true about the military records fire that happened? Because, I've heard some pretty strong arguments to say that if he was military, we have his fingerprints on file and it would at least have some sort of a connection or a suspect pool that matched the aspects of fingerprints that we have. But then I hear about this fire that happened in California that destroyed all of these fingerprints. And then I hear all this other contradictory evidence that, I mean, it's just from all over the place. So what's the actual legitimacy there?
The fire is 100% a real thing. Drew Beeson is the expert on that, and not even just from Cheney Air Force Zodiac, as a matter of fact, from Ted Braden and Cooper as well. So that and Drew's the expert on MACV.
And we know that fire destroyed fingerprint evidence that wasn't backed up.
It destroyed entire files. It destroyed entire military files. Do we know what year? Was it 74? It's a question for Drew.
I'm not sure.
It definitely destroyed not everything, but a good amount. So if you were some sort of Treasure Island or up there or whatever, It could go a lot of ways. But I think that's going to do it for me, lads. I actually, unfortunately, have to go type a paper, which I don't want to do. But big shout outs to everybody. Zach for joining us. Druzer coming back. Mr. B, my man.
He's homie, dog.
Definitely check out me over on Zodiac Speaking and everybody else that was on the recent episodes. If you guys don't have anything else for me, I'm thinking I'm going to jet the Luger, the 9mm Luger. You guys saw what I said about Daredevils of the Red Circle. There's a hooded guy in a picture looking like he's holding that kind of Luger pistol. So I thought that could be pretty significant. But again, I'm the comic book hate monger, whatever you want to call it, hood inspiration nerd. So very easy for all of that to lead nowhere on my end. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys feel.
You were great today, Ross. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Later, brother.
Before you go, I would like to say that we will try to do this panel every 2 weeks, because each week it's difficult for everybody to fit with the hour, because we are all around the world.
For real.
It's difficult. So we will try to do it every 2 weeks. And during the time between the panel, I'm going to continue the show with Ned, with maybe Ross, with maybe Druzer, maybe with Zach. I don't know. We will see.
Whoever's available, we'll keep it rolling.
Yeah.
All right. See you later, buddy.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you, boys.
Back like Falk.
I'm my show's coming back too, so hopefully I can maybe get Jersey for some co-hosts, and look out for my channel sub.
Yeah, we'll do that movie review soon, Ross.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to do that. You feel free to join us, Druzer. Zodiac 1971, the masterpiece, the Zodiac Killer.
Sure.
All right, boys, have a good show. I'll talk to you guys later.
Care.
Peace.
Thank you. Take care, my friend.
Whoa.
Well.
Sorry, guys. I'll take this opportunity to apologize if I've interrupted anybody at any point. I get so excited about certain things.
Oh, we all do.
Don't be sorry. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
And I have ADHD like crazy, which doesn't help with the Zodiac case, because all of a sudden in like 10 minutes, I'm researching a guy named Sandy, and I'm like, wait a second, why am I even looking at this? And then you're constantly doing these audits, right? And I don't mean to sound skeptical or like a hater of some things. It's just I have this inherent dislike for the mountaintop to be, oh, he told me and I can't say why. Or, and that being at multiple places in the Zodiac. So it's not that I disbelieve people. It's just hard for me to live in a world where it just seems so cultish. I can't do it.
Well, we have to scrutinize this information the best we can, but in so many instances, hearsay, be it from police or someone who talked to the police or even some author, it's all we have to go on. Yeah,
I have a hard time with it just because, I'm just a skeptic by nature. When somebody has a book to sell or or an ego to protect or anything, I think a lot of stuff just kind of falls out the window, and it's really hard for me to believe. It's a disease, I guess.
It's hard to discuss something when there's no definitive statements that you can make. Like you can't. There's so few things that you can say this is a fact, and I have nothing further that I need to add to the statement. Everything has footnotes. There's
and I find it, no matter how much of an expert I feel like I am on some 5-minute fragment of the crimes, I'll hit you up about it and you'll tell me, oh well, this person said this and they found this and this time and this time. So it's just like, oh, okay, well, I'm fucked.
Yeah, I mean, we all are, Zach. Like, it's really hard to develop a theory when there are so many unknowns. You have to. If you want to build a theory, you have to say, okay, I have decided it was one guy. He was white. He was 30. He lived here. He lived there, whatever. But none of those things we can really be all that confident in.
I mean, the fact that he was white is about the only thing, and that he was a male.
Yeah. And then, he's described with a medium complexion. And then you have to audit these little, I get these mystery tidbits that like really tantalize me sometimes, right? And
The most recent one I heard was somebody brought up that Zodiac stole Stein's glasses and walked away from the crime scene wearing them. And, admittedly, I didn't put any research into it at all. I was just like, cool.
Even David Fincher offered that.
Yeah.
It's because they just haven't been forthcoming with everything they know about the crime. And when in 2010,
but we do have a crime scene photo of Stein wearing the glasses.
A crime scene photo of Stein? No, they're not on his head when we see the crime photos. No. But we wouldn't expect them to be on his head after he is, pulled to the side of the cab. He's found with, head face down into the floorboards. They're not going to stay on his head, and all we have are these black and white shadow-filled photos. So,
I thought I was shown a photo that looked pretty clearly like he was wearing the glasses lying there, but maybe I'm wrong.
Wait.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that they collected the photos, but there's a lot of things that make it seem less than official because they're not listed in the few documents we have. There's lots of things that we know he was wearing that are not listed in the recovery files. He said he was wearing a disguise. And in 2009, I think it was, a lady named Deborah Perez came forward saying her grandfather was the Zodiac, or maybe it was her father, I don't know. But she said she had recovered Paul Stein's glasses, and this was a big media sensation. And the police did not take that opportunity to say, no, we recovered the glasses. What they said is they will look into it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it's possible, but you would have to believe that Zodiac took prescription glasses and put them on his head when he wanted to walk away from the crime scene, and I think that's not.
But what a James
realistic.
Bond move,
James Bond would want to see his pursuers. Clearly,
I mean, fair enough, but in the way of it's tantalizing in the way of the comic book side of it, right? And it's oh god.
Majot, our first Zodiac crime scene witness, didn't notice glasses. So you have to say, well, Majot was wrong, or Zodiac didn't need glasses at that time.
And there also seems to be some back and forth as to whether or not the aviators had glasses behind them. I know, Druzer, you said that you don't believe he had glasses underneath those aviators.
Yeah, Cecilia said she saw them.
She said that she saw glasses behind the aviators. I do believe, yes, I do remember reading that.
And that makes sense, not just for stability, but also because, we certainly assume that he wore glasses and needed them, and that's why he was wearing them in Presidio Heights. Mm-hmm. Now, whether he had some non-prescription, just clear lens glasses on and was using them as a disguise, can't discount that.
Yeah. Maybe. Well, I guess, and if we're going to funnel down the information, if he's wearing glasses at Presidio, and we believe Cecilia Shepard, and it's reasonable to believe he was wearing glasses at Lake Berryessa, and the least accurate description is coming from Mike Majot, and he's saying he's not noticing glasses, then I think that we can move forward with the assumption that he wore glasses.
Yeah, but again, it's one of those things where would you write off a suspect because they didn't wear glasses? Probably
I might. Well, I mean, not right off, but I would definitely. It's without the existence of contacts and things like that at the time, it just feels like, oh yeah, I don't know, man. I go back and forth in that within seconds.
Yeah. Okay. This is related. One of the reasons why I write off Don Chaney as a potential suspect is because all of the letters were sent from San Francisco, but there was a remailer service that you could use even back then, where you could send a letter from anywhere and have it say that it came from San Francisco.
Really?
Yeah. Sounds far-fetched, and it's probably not true, but it's another footnote on the.
Sorry, what's not true? Not true that the killer did it?
I think it's unlikely that the killer happened to use this remailer service and didn't live in the area. I think that's unlikely. But it's possible. You know, just like they had crew cut.
That's a son of a bitch, isn't it?
They had crew cut shaped wigs. I had never heard of them until I started studying the case.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another thing. I mean, did this guy have longish curly hair as he was described in multiple occasions, and had it stuffed under a crew cut wig, or did he just get a haircut? You know,
Yeah.
At some point, I think you have to go with probability, but it's not very satisfying.
Man, the remailer service and having it come from that is really interesting. And if somebody was like aware of how, you know, was not so much aware, but just like, you know, astute to how the mailing service works, which I guess Zodiac would probably be if he wanted to send letters and be forensically and be aware of counter forensics when it came to how those letters would have been backtracked. I mean, it's interesting.
Assuming that he used so many stamps, not because he didn't know what he was doing, but because he wanted his mailings to stand out, just like he chose specific, unusually shaped paper and always used the same blue felt tip pen. It's hard to say. Like this is a guy who sent a letter not by airmail, yet wrote airmail in giant letters on the envelope. So we really don't know.
So does
what
that
we're
not
doing
show? Does that not show that he is trying to throw red herrings as to how the letter got delivered and where it came from? Does that not show that he's aware?
Again, it's a theory.
Well, is it a theory if it does suggest it? Like, I mean, if we're at a fork in a road and we're saying, okay, was he aware of mailing services at that time and how detailed it was? And he has airmail written on it and all these things that point to him having some sort of knowledge of the inner workings of how the Federal Mail Service works. Does that not further suggest that he would utilize other tools to mask where he's writing these letters from? Like, I mean, that doesn't seem like a huge leap of logic.
It's not a huge leap of logic. It's just not confirmed.
Right. That's one of those things that for a guy that doesn't like unverifiable evidence, there seems to be a lot of verifiable possibilities that was utilized.
Yes, there's a lot of verifiable possibilities.
Right. And there's a difference between verifiable possibilities and not, right? So
I would like to have your take on that, because I have realized that the other day. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong and my eyes trick me. But this is the back of Betty Lou Jensen. What do you see here between the number 3 and 4 here? What did you see?
You mean the blood spattering?
Yeah, because me, I think I see a footprint.
I think it's fun to say that it's a footprint, but once I start actually looking at it, it doesn't really resemble a foot at all.
She was clothed when found.
Yeah. But the footprint with the blood creating this stuff on her skin. You see what I mean?
Yeah. It's also worth noting, because this is perhaps the best proof that the author was the killer, is that when Zodiac left the scene and when the first Stella Maduris came by and discovered the body, she was on her right side.
Yeah.
When the police arrived a short while later, she was on her back.
Yeah. She was moved.
Well,
she had rolled over.
Yeah. She still had vital signs, and she met her ultimate end after she was discovered. But yeah, probably not kicked.
Which explains. Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, it seems like there's too much happening there between dirt and blood and stuff mixed in with the shirt, and then pulling a shirt up to take photos of the wound and all this, and blood moving and things and whatnot to draw a conclusion. But I mean, it looks kind of like a foot at first, but then it's very difficult to actually place that as that.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, I'm getting to my time limit here.
Yeah, me too.
I got
Yeah.
things to do today.
This was really fun though. I miss doing this show.
Yeah, I had the best time ever. Thank you so much for having me, Jerome, Mr. Host. I've been a fan. I'll take this opportunity to say I've been a fan and watched for a long time. My wife can attest to me falling into the Zodiac wormhole, you know, and talking about all your guys' names. Druzer, I think you're the Green Ranger of this shit. I always picture you like getting morphed down like a Power Ranger in the Green Ranger suit and like cutting up a whole bunch of fucking bullshit in like Lake Berryessa and stuff and then morphing out. I really like you. And in my head, you're a really cool character.
Thank you very much.
And and I appreciate all of you. I love a lot of aspects of the Zodiac community. Not all, but a lot.
Nice. Me too.
Yeah. Thank you both very much to accepting my invitation.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to come back on anytime, Jerome.
When you want. If you want to come back next week, you are really welcome. Druzer, you know, there you are at home. I hope to have Richard as soon as possible back in the panel.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do this on another weekend. Weekends are my only possibility.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
That's
so
why
Sundays work for me too.
Yeah.
I've moved from Monday to Sunday because it's more easy for you. For example, I mean everybody's free on Sunday, so
yeah,
it's more easy to do the show on Sunday, and that's why we do the panel discussion on Sunday. And during the week, like I was saying earlier, I'm going to do show with Ned like I was doing before, talking about a specific case, and doing other stuff. If Druzer contact me to say, hey Jerome, we can do a little show of 30 minutes about this specific point, we do the show. If you, Zach, you want to talk about something really specific, you contact me and we do it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good, man. I'm in.
All right, see you in a couple of weeks, fellas.
Okay, boys, take care. See you on Discord, Druzer.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, see you on Discord.
Goodbye, chat. Yeah. Goodbye, chat.
Bye, my friend. Take care of you. So thank you very much, everybody in the chat. I'm really happy to see you. It's been a while since the last time. The last time it was with Ross. Excellent episode with Ross. Thank you to Quentin Brown for his new membership and his $10. Thank you very much. There is no obligation, but thank you very much. It means a lot to me. Thank you, Dark Side of the Moon. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Fire Pixie. Thank you, Ross, Mr. GFC, Andrew Gray, for sure. Thank you, Zack Attack. Thank you to Donald Duck Quaker. I love the nickname you take on it. Richie Harris. Thank you very much. Quentin Brown, I have already said, but I repeat. Garrett Shepard. Thank you very much. And I think Fire PC, Quentin. Zodiac Archive Project. Thank you very much. Cap Jenks. Thank you very much. Pete Dassey. Hi, bro. Hi, how you doing? Pete is the father of Brendan Dassey, who was falsely accused of a murder in 2005 of Teresa Halbach, like his uncle, Stephen Avery. And we have tried to do our best during years and years and years to try to do everything we could to try to help Steve and Brandon. Now it's in the hand of Kathleen Zellner, and even if I think Kathleen Zellner is wrong, it's like that. I hope for Brandon that it will be new stuff for him, because there is no way that Steven and Brandon must still in prison for nothing. It's too long. So I can do a new video about making a murderer, but to make a recap of the situation, if you want, because there is, let's say, nothing new. I'm sorry. There is nothing new in the sense of the I hope Brandon is fine. Oh, Cheryl. Yes, Cheryl was listening the podcast, the show, in his car, in her car. Sorry. Yeah, email me with topic suggestion. I'm going to give you my email address here. Cheryl, I miss you, Ronnie. You know that. I miss you. And I miss my Winnie too. My Sharon Sunshine. I miss her. So, I hope you have spent a good time. I think we are going to end with one of my songs, and I'm going to release all the songs. Believe me. Don't be worried about that. I try to find one that I never share with you. Yeah, maybe this one. So, guys, we will see you on not next Monday, not next Sunday, but in 2 weeks for a panel discussion. But we will see you. I'm going to. We will see us during the week or during the weekend, or I'm going to see what is possible. So thank you very much for your support, for your love, for everything. Take care of yourself. Take care of your loved one. Take care of you. It's really important in this time of crazy war and crazy stuff who happen all around the world, who means nothing. But yeah. Okay, we go with maybe a last one. Everybody be safe. Take care of you, Pete. Ready. And when you have Brandon, tell him that we all love him and we are all behind him. Same for Steven. Same. It's the same. Yeah, contact me here. This is the Zodiac@gmail.com. If you don't have so already, please hit subscribe. It's come from the dude, very cozy. And take care, everyone, and happy St. Patrick Day for tomorrow. Sure. Oh yeah. That's true. It's St. Patrick tomorrow. Yeah. Take care until next time, and I leave you with a song. This song.
conscience every day. Rising my divine to the one more day. Anybody ever looking at me? I hear all that in my head is worry. Why do I have a conscience every day? Rising my divine to the one more day. Anybody ever looking at me? I hear all that in my head is worry. Why do I have a conscience every day? Why do my neighbor to the one more day? Anybody ever looking at me? I hear all that in my head is worry. Why do I have a conscience every day? Why do my neighbor to do one more day? Anybody ever looking at me? I hear all that in my head is worry. I can see my friend die when I do pop, pop, pop. In the light, maybe drop, top, top, top. But I don't care about it. Go the line, don't go and die. Something has changed, but I don't want to hear down. One night, Husseini, the criminal with one hiccup eyes and one to lie. Don't care when God to lie. Don't care God to lie. Don't care God to lie. To see, just to see. Wrapped up so real, the real guy. No doubt, so real to see how those shades. Fuck up and then let's all out. Don't be quiet. crochet. Parce que la Belgique n'est pas fière. La nation qui boit du cola, les gens qui sont sous coca. Censure la censure, que c'est l'eau. Jesus Christ, Jesus don't want the dream. We're chasers, we're chasing trust. First goodbye. This fucking host to stand by. Beg your mother and sing a song. Well, sing a song. The thing was gone. It's not humanity, it's not I'll go and rob a bank and kill any people who cry. Why don't leave the universe and why don't running the street? I ride on the brain last street. I don't believe that you never think. Why don't believe that you never think? 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 Why the sky and my town? Catch up!